For over
Captain, look at
25
this!
years, one man has been unlocking the government's most closely guarded secrets. Utilizing the Freedom of Information Act, researcher John Greenwald Jr. established the Black Vault, the largest online repository of declassified U.S. documents in the world. Within its millions of pages lie remnants of information that officials have denied for decades. From accounts of UFO sightings to covert military initiatives, each file reveals a narrative once shrouded in secrecy. Welcome to Secrets from the Black Vault. Let's explore the USS Kid and the drone swarm incident of 2019. Southern California Operating Areas, USA, July 14, 2019. The evening was warm, visibility was limited, and the sea was tranquil. The USS Kid DDG-100, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, navigated through the Navy's Southern California operating areas, a vast stretch of ocean routinely utilized for training and live-fire exercises. At 2200 hours, a standard log entry was made from the ship's bridge that, in retrospect, would reveal itself as extraordinary. 2 unmanned aerial systems were spotted hovering above the ship's flight deck. Radar subsequently confirmed small airborne objects keeping pace with the destroyer at approximately 16 knots. The watch crew observed faint lights above the helicopter deck, steady, silent, and unwavering despite the Kid's alterations in course. The entry, later released under FOIA case number 2021-9227, marks the beginning of what would evolve into one of the most well-documented drone occurrences in contemporary U.S. naval history. 10 minutes later, the USS John Finn DDG-113, operating within the same grid square, reported identical sightings of multiple unknown objects hovering above. Both vessels recorded the same term, Snoopy team deployed, following Navy protocol indicating the activation of the ship's photographic interpretation and exploitation team. Sailors trained to capture still photographs and video footage for intelligence analysis were promptly dispatched. By 2245, a third destroyer, the USS Rafael Peralta DDG-115, entered the scenario, documenting a white light hovering over its flight deck, alongside 2 additional unmanned aerial systems tracking its port quarter. The captain ordered the ship's deck lights to be extinguished, and communications transitioned to encrypted circuits as the destroyers maneuvered in near darkness. These simultaneous observations across 3 destroyers would later be summarized in internal Navy briefings as the commencement of the 2019 UAS swarm event. For the subsequent 90 minutes, the drones remained persistent, hovering at altitudes varying between 200 and 400 feet, occasionally closing to within 200 yards of the vessel's bridges. According to radar position data obtained later by the war zone, each time the ship adjusted its speed or heading, the unknowns adapted instantaneously. At 23:57, the Kid entered River City Condition 2, a communications security lockdown rarely enacted outside of combat conditions. From the bridge, the sailors remained transfixed on the lights, which were steady white, then amber, moving methodically against the haze. They did not flash like navigation beacons. One log entry succinctly noted that lights appeared to flash toward the bridge. At minute 3 after midnight on July 15th, the Kid increased its velocity and altered course westward. The drones trailed closely behind. The Snoopy team persevered in its documentation, and those files remain classified. 15 minutes later, 2 additional vessels, the USS Russell DDG-59 and USS Paul Hamilton DDG-60, reported similar incursions. By the conclusion of the night, at least 5 U.S. Navy destroyers had documented simultaneous unidentified aerial phenomena persisting for nearly 3 hours. Initially, the Navy's internal summary categorized them as likely small unmanned aircraft. However, no launch source or operator was ever identified. A nearby Coast Guard cutter conducted a search for potential commercial vessels that might have been directing the drones, but none were discovered. Civilian radar and automatic identification system data collected during that evening, later scrutinized by independent analysts, recorded only 2 non-military ships in the region, the Carnival Imagination cruise liner, and a fishing trawler from San Pedro Bay. Crew members aboard the cruise ship communicated that 5 or 6 drones were visible, rapidly traversing high above the water, asserting that these were not theirs. The log of the Rafael Peralta contained one particularly alarming entry, noting that a drone was flashing a light directly into the bridge windows. This observation prompted immediate intelligence reporting. Within 24 hours, naval intelligence categorized the incidents as a potential counterintelligence breach. On the evening of July 15th, new contacts materialized once more, pacing the destroyers for 2 additional hours before disappearing from both radar and visual observation. Additional entries on July 25th and July 30th confirmed similar incursions occurring within the same training area. A classified PowerPoint subsequently released under the FOIA titled UAS Swarm Timeline, chronicled from July 14th to July 30th, 2019, presented at least 8 verified events involving ships from Destroyer Squadron. 23. Hundreds of pages of deck logs, emails, and briefing documents procured through the FOIA illustrates the Navy's escalating concern. One redacted communication originating from the Chief of Naval Operations Intelligence Plot, NEE-2, characterized the behavior as highly concerning UAS activity, sustained and coordinated. Another correspondence articulated that the events were repeating over consecutive nights, suggesting potential multi-vehicle control from an unknown surface platform. Yet, no such platform was ever uncovered. Estimates of drone endurance overshadowed expectations, with each incident lasting between 1 and 3 hours, far exceeding the 25 to 35 minutes typical for commercial quadcopters. Even sophisticated fixed-wing drones would have necessitated line-of-sight control or satellite connections, both of which were implausible within Navy airspace restrictions. Investigators scoured marinas and ports from Los Angeles to San Diego, yet the Coast Guard, Harbor Police, and FAA reported no flight plans, no permits, and no claims of responsibility. In early 2020, after sustained FOIA requests, the Navy validated the authenticity of the released logs. During a briefing on March 4, 2021, Admiral Michael Gilda, the Chief of Naval Operations, was directly asked whether the craft involved had been identified. His response was clear and succinct. No, they had not identified the crafts associated with those incidents. The data persists under scrutiny. This proclamation stands as the Navy's highest level of acknowledgement regarding the swarm incident. The context adds considerable significance. The destroyers were maneuvering near San Clemente Island, a heavily monitored Navy range utilized for missile testing and electronic warfare drills. Incursions in this region are infrequent and typically intercepted within a matter of minutes. The fact that multiple warships tracked drones within this airspace for several hours without resolution hints at either a gap in detection capabilities or the presence of an operator possessing sophisticated technology. Analysts specializing in electronic intelligence, examining the unclassified summaries, noted that shipboard sensors registered radio frequency emissions at odds with those associated with commercial drone usage. The redacted sections of the technical annex release suggest frequency hopping or encrypted communications, characteristic features of military-grade systems. A partially declassified document from the Navy Counter-UAS Integration Office indicated that the craft exhibited control discipline, formation coherence, and energy management surpassing what is typically seen in ordinary UAS group flights. In simpler terms, these objects navigated with clear intent. No evidence has tied these incidents to testing conducted by the Navy or its contractors. The Federal Aviation Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, and local defense laboratories all denied involvement in any drone operations that matched the timing and geography of the reported events. Though photographs and videos related to the incidents remain classified, their existence has been affirmed through references found in the USS Kid Intelligence Annex, where photo and video imagery is restricted. Throughout July of 2019, no fewer than 11 distinct decklog entries from the 5 destroyers recorded similar occurrences. multiple UAS, continuous illumination, close approaches, all without identification. Reconstructed automatic identification system tracks reveal the ship spread over nearly 100 nautical miles southwest of San Clemente Island, implying that several drones operated simultaneously during these incursions. Navy analysts contemplated a range of possibilities: commercial photographers, intelligence contractors, or even uncoordinated testing by various U.S. agencies. Yet, no conclusive evidence emerged. Each hypothesis faltered at fundamental verification points: endurance, control, range, and coordination. By April of 2021, the Navy issued a brief unclassified statement summarizing the incidents. An investigation involving several entities, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, yielded no definitive identification of the operators or the types of platforms involved. These occurrences were classified as unresolved UAS activity. The documentation trail remains meticulous. Deck logs, timestamps, bearing marks, radar overlays, all meticulously recorded by professionals whose expertise lies in documenting without embellishment. Amid their entries about propulsion checks and navigation lights, certain phrases stand out for their stark simplicity. Multiple UAS around ship, closest point of approach 200 yards, no identification. The authenticity of these records has never been called into question. The Navy has not rescinded or altered a single entry. Subsequent discussions with officers who were involved in the incidents hint that certain drones achieved speeds estimated between 40 and 50 knots, occasionally ascending beyond 500 feet into controlled airspace. None were intercepted. Engagement rules mandated by the Navy required a positive identification before any defensive action could be taken, and the unknowns did not exhibit overt hostility. In 2022, oversight for this case shifted to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force and subsequently to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Their analysts continue to regard the 2019 swarm as a high-priority dataset. One partially redacted slide in the holdings of Arrow states that both range and endurance are inconsistent with known small UAS models as of 2019. Therefore, the USS Kid incident stands not as mere rumor, but as a documented reality. Freedom of Information Act, releases, archived emails, and deck logs confirm the events across multiple vessels and operations. This remains one of the most data-rich yet unexplained occurrences in recent history of the U.S. Navy. 4 years later, Admiral Gilda was once again queried regarding the 2019 events, and his response remained unchanged. "We have collected the data. We have not identified the craft." Those words encapsulate the Navy's official stance. What persists is the precision of what was observed and meticulously recorded. Times, bearings, and altitudes measured by radar, corroborated by visual confirmation, and logged by hand. The enigma lies not in whether these objects existed, but in why they manifested and who commanded them. The 2019 destroyer swarm remains a case study of documented events without clear explanation. An incident witnessed by many, quantified by advanced systems, and preserved in detail in the ship's records. Beneath the careful handwriting of the logkeeper aboard the USS Kid, one sentence captures the essence of it all. Multiple UAS around ship maintaining station, no identification. This line still reverberates throughout the fleet, a reminder that even with the most advanced sensors available, there exist moments when the ocean conceals something yet unnamed. Malmström Air Force Base, Montana, 1967. March 16, 1967. The fields of central Montana lay blanketed under a muted morning haze. Beneath that serene landscape, within a reinforced underground capsule designated Echo Flight, 2 U.S. Air Force officers were tasked with the routine monitoring of 10 Minuteman I nuclear missiles. Captain Eric T. Carlson acted as the flight commander, with First Lieutenant Walter File serving as the deputy. At 8:45 a.m. local time, disaster struck. An indicator for one missile shifted from green to red, indicating a no-go status. Moments later, another missile followed suit. Within mere seconds, all 10 missiles of Echo flight had simultaneously entered the same alarming status: launch disable. There was no disruption of power, no seismic disturbances, and no alarms of intrusion sounded. Communication systems remained fully functional. Carlson relayed the situation to the Malmström command post, stating, "Echo flight is down. All birds are off alert." This communication is confirmed in the quarter ending March 31, 1967, of the official internal records of the incident from the 341st Strategic Missile Wing. It states verbatim that on the 16th of March, 1967, 10 missiles in Echo flight lost their strategic alert status. Following an exhaustive inquiry, the speculations surrounding unidentified flying objects in the vicinity were definitively disproven. Remarkably, this solitary paragraph remains the only surviving official documentation regarding the event, yet its existence undeniably corroborates the fact that a complete missile flight shutdown transpired, an extraordinary occurrence that defies the laws of probability under ordinary circumstances. Located in the vicinity of Roy, Montana, the Echo Launch Control Center was one among 15 capsules that formed part of the 341st Strategic Missile Wing. Each center commanded 10 missiles through an intricate web of buried communication lines that extended deep beneath the vast expanse of prairie. Designed with an ingenuity meant to resist every conceivable failure, the Minuteman system had defenses against nuclear detonations, electromagnetic pulses, power surges, and even sabotage. Each missile operated autonomously, with extensive redundancy in both power and communication circuits, rendering it virtually impossible for all 10 to simultaneously fail. An external disturbance capable of affecting every guidance and control channel simultaneously would be an unprecedented phenomenon, one that subsequent engineers admitted could not be duplicated under test conditions. Immediately, maintenance teams from the 341st Missile Maintenance Squadron were deployed to the 10 impacted launch facilities. Their recorded logs, which were later made public through the Freedom of Information Act, indicated no signs of mechanical damage or power disruptions. Environmental systems remained stable throughout the incident. The team replaced a number of guidance and control units, allowing each missile to regain full alert status within a mere 24 hours. The official investigation found no discernible cause for the mass outage. On the same morning, approximately 20 meters away, security personnel at another base known as Oscar Flight recounted sightings of an aerial object hovering above their perimeter. Captain Robert Salas, the on-duty officer, later confirmed that his guards described a large, glowing red-orange object that hovered silently above. Shortly thereafter, his own missile indicator systems began to exhibit anomalies. While Oscar Flight did not experience a complete missile loss, the timing of its disruption mirrored Echo Flight's almost precisely. Captain Salas's original statement, delivered publicly in the 1990s, was dismissed by the Air Force as anecdotal evidence, yet the command history entries and the recorded timing of the outage align with his account within mere minutes. Both Carlson and Field confirmed the comprehensive shutdown of Echo Flight, but maintained that they observed no aerial phenomenon. Their attention remained fixated on system diagnostics, with power readings proving normal and command signals remaining intact. Carlson's subsequent interviews supported the assertion that no internal malfunctions were detected and that all 10 missiles regained operational status solely after the replacement of the control units. The Air Force's own command log, which was declassified in the Freedom of Information Act, Case F 2002-08977, substantiated the timeline of events and the duration of the restoration process. A later FOIA release in 2004 featured the same documentation, but omitting crucial technical attachments titled Maintenance Evaluation Echo Flight and Engineering Analysis of Guidance and Control Channel Interruption. These vital annexes remain absent from all publicly disclosed versions, even as their references populate the Command History Index. Their exclusion stands as one of the most significant facts in the entire record. Meanwhile, reports from civilians surfaced across central Montana during the same week. The Great Falls Tribune of March 17, 1967, recounted sightings of unusual red aerial lights near Lewistown. The Air Force's investigative branch, the Office of Special Investigations, undertook a standard security inquiry for potential intrusion or espionage, but discovered nothing amiss. Additionally, the radar data for March 16, reviewed by independent analysts, showed no unauthorized tracks in the area. Nonetheless, on March 24, 1967, the Strategic Air Command issued an internal memorandum mandating heightened security protocols around missile installations, a response that coincided precisely with the Malmström incident. Technicians involved in the investigation speculated about the possibility of electromagnetic interference or transient voltage surges traversing through the command lines. Yet, environmental data collected for that day indicated no lightning activity, no solar flares, and no regional geomagnetic disturbances that could account for the remarkably synchronized electronic failure. Over the years, Air Force veterans and engineers have revisited this peculiar case. In a 2010 interview, Eric Carlson reinforced the critical timeline. At 8:45, all 10 missiles went offline. We executed power and communication checks. Everything appeared normal. Components were replaced and the missiles were brought back online. I did not observe any object. That is all I can affirm. Lieutenant Colonel Fila echoed this account, elaborating that the outage triggered an immediate technical alert across the wing. Both men were subsequently debriefed, and the incident was officially classified as a guidance and control malfunction, with the cause remaining an enigma. As the early 2000s approached, additional documents surfaced via the Black Vault, affirming that the document identified as K416A341SMW history, dated January 31, 1967, contained that same singular paragraph, summarizing the event with the identical phrasing appearing in later quarterly reports through 1969. The repetition suggests that it crystallized into the official institutional narrative. The event transpired, rumors of UFOs were dismissed, and no apparent technical cause was identified. Independent researcher Robert Hastings later consolidated testimonies from several Malmström veterans who recounted similar malfunctions in other flight units occurring shortly after the Echo incident. His comprehensive inquiries culminated in the 2010 publication, UFOs and Nukes. Hastings verified through FOIA requests that segments of the original missile maintenance records remained withheld under national security exemptions, 5 U.S.C. Section 552, subsection B, paragraph 1, citing concerns pertaining to national defense or foreign policy. The fact that such documents remain classified is independently verifiable through the letters pertaining to FOIA releases. The United States Air Force has yet to retract the command history entry, nor offered any comprehensive technical clarification beyond the vague reference to equipment malfunction. Within the documents released, no record assigns the unusual event to human error, acts of sabotage, or recognized environmental factors. Therefore, the sole written acknowledgement capturing the full extent of the Echolite incident is confined to the summary within the command history from 1967 and its succinct technical annex. The few preserved sentences obtained through the Freedom of Information Act and archived in the Black Vault affirm without question that at 8:45 local time on March 16, 1967, 10 Minuteman missiles were simultaneously rendered non-operational. Thorough examination revealed no physical or electrical failures, and these missiles were restored to functionality within a 24-hour time frame. The official conclusion left the cause shrouded in ambiguity. Since that incident, every independent investigation, whether through declassified documents, the testimonies of veterans, or correspondences from the Air Force, has converged upon the same realization. The event transpired, it was undeniably real, yet its underlying mechanism remains elusively unspecified. In more technical terms, the Echolight incident's complete loss of alert status stands as the only substantiated case where an entire intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM flight, was simultaneously disabled without any command input. The command history itself constitutes the Air Force's own validation of this fact. Now, 50 years later, the trail of Freedom of Information Act records continues to narrate a quiet yet persistent story. The release letters acknowledge the existence of redacted pages, absent attachments, and ongoing security exemptions that still prevail. No further investigation has been initiated. The United States Air Force categorizes the matter as resolved, yet this resolution yields no definitive cause. This contradiction within the Malmström file remains striking. The official account ratifies the occurrence while simultaneously negating its origin. In the same breath, we find Malmström Air Force Base, Echolight, 10 nuclear missiles, 1 unexplained shutdown, a solitary paragraph that survived the rigors of declassification, alongside a multitude of pages that remain concealed. As the focus shifts to Tehran, we remember an encounter involving an F-4 interceptor in Iran on September 19, 1976. The night over Tehran, Iran unfolded quietly beneath an unblemished sky until the first alert echoed through the Iranian Air Force command tower. Residents in Shaiman, a district situated to the north of the capital, began reporting a luminous object traversing the sky with erratic motions, bright, silent, and distinctly unlike any recognized aircraft. Within minutes, radar operators stationed at Mehrabad International Airport confirmed a solid return at 32 nautical miles north of Tehran. The object remained stationary, devoid of any transponder signal. At precisely 0030 local time, the Imperial Iranian Air Force mobilized a McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II, tail number 35305, dispatched from Sharif Air Base, located 175 miles west of the capital. Captain Mohammad Raza Azarbarzan ascended to 20,000 feet. However, as he approached the target, his onboard radar registered a strong return, only to be followed moments later by a catastrophic failure. His entire weapons panel and communication systems ceased to operate. His aircraft's instruments froze in place, radar locks failed, and all electrical systems collapsed simultaneously. Responding to the sudden malfunction, Azarbarzan aborted the intercept, choosing to return to base. Fascinatingly, upon altering his course away from the radiant object, all systems swiftly resumed normal function. Almost immediately thereafter, the command center launched a secondary interceptor, another F-4 Phantom, tail number 35307. This aircraft was piloted by Lieutenant Parvi Jafari, a seasoned squadron leader. His radar officer, Lieutenant Darian, confirmed a lock-on at 27 nautical miles, bearing azimuth 290 degrees from Mehrabad. As they closed the distance to within 25 miles, the radar screen depicted a blip approximately the size of a Boeing 707. Visual confirmation would eventually reveal an intensely bright object, which Jafari described in his subsequent report as radiant, akin to sunlight but emanating hues of blue, green, and red. This object appeared to maintain a consistent altitude of roughly 25,000 feet, gliding silently over the Alborz Mountains. At a distance of 12 miles, Jafari prepared to engage with an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile. However, just prior to firing, his weapon system failed. His radar warning receiver and fire control circuits experienced complete shutdown, while communications with ground control fell silent. Amidst this chaos, the pilot experienced a sudden loss of cockpit pressure, along with a partial blackout of his instrument panel lighting. As he disengaged and veered away from the UFO, all systems remarkably returned to normal. The Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a message titled, "Sighting of a UFO in Iran on the night of September 19, 1976, which delineated the event with meticulous military precision. Visual observations and radar confirmations corroborated the bright object's existence. When the aircraft drew close enough for a Sidewinder shot, the object displayed rapid acceleration, leading to the F-4's complete loss of instrumentation and communications. Upon withdrawal, these crucial systems reactivated seamlessly. Shortly after the weapons lock malfunctioned, Jafari observed a smaller object detach from the primary luminous body, accelerating directly toward his aircraft. Believing he had come under attack, he attempted to deploy flares, only to discover that his control system was inactive. The smaller entity paused at a short distance before veering downward in a seemingly controlled dive toward the ground. Soon after, a second smaller light detached, hurtling toward the ground at high speed. Both of these phenomena remained visible from the cockpit as well as to spectators on the ground. Witnesses situated near Mehrabad Airport recounted their observations of a bright object descending and illuminating an area near Shamaran before vanishing from sight. Radar controllers tracked both descending targets for a brief moment before their signals disappeared entirely. In due course, the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, encapsulated the incident with the classification IR6846013676. It was classified as secret at the time, but released through FOIA in 1978. This cable, directed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Agency, and the White House, categorized the event as an exceptional example of a UFO encounter. Their assessment revealed the Iranian case epitomizes a classic that conforms to all criteria necessary for a substantive investigation of the UFO phenomenon. The object was corroborated by numerous eyewitnesses visually, confirmed via radar, and imposed a definitive and adverse effect on the instrumentation of the aircraft. The report further elaborates on the series of technical data, including radar logs, testimonies from aircrew, and meteorological conditions. The weather was observed as clear, with calm winds and unrestricted visibility. No temperature inversion, aurora, or any atmospheric phenomenon could reasonably explain the corroboration of radar and visual sightings across multiple distances. Among the most pivotal details was the radar signature itself. The return from the object lacked a transponder and showed no signs of side lobes, indicating it was a solid reflective target rather than mere atmospheric interference or jamming. The Mehrabad radar monitored the object's altitude, which fluctuated between 25,000 and 40,000 feet, before accelerating beyond the limits of radar detection. At approximately 1:40 a.m. local time, Jafari re-established communication with control. As he began to circle back toward Tehran, he observed another luminous object hovering in the southern part of the city, spherical, bright white, and roughly half the apparent size of the moon. He sought permission to investigate further, yet was instructed to maintain his distance. The Mehrabad radar confirmed the second object is stationary at 15,000 feet, approximately 10 miles south of the base. As Jafari's aircraft closed to within 10 miles, the secondary object appeared to emit a smaller glowing component, which descended rapidly toward the ground, pausing briefly over the desert before vanishing. Ground controllers documented the descent and suspected an impact near Ray, which lies south of Tehran. Iranian military personnel dispatched a helicopter crew at dawn to conduct a search of the area. They did not uncover any wreckage, but did note a circular depression in the earth along with residual radio static present on communication channels. All reports regarding radar data, flight operations, and debriefs were compiled into a classified summary, transmitted to the headquarters of the United States Air Force in Washington, D.C. On the 20th of September, 1976, the correspondence reached the National Military Command Center, the National Security Agency, and the Central Intelligence Agency. The declassified copy, which now resides within the Black Vault archive, concludes with the statement that this case exemplifies a classic which fulfills all requisite criteria for a legitimate UFO report. The reliability of the findings is deemed high. Subsequent analyses by the United States Air Force conducted in collaboration with the Defense Attaché Office in Tehran reviewed the maintenance logs of the aircraft. Each F-4 underwent extensive post-flight inspections, with no mechanical faults discovered. The electrical and hydraulic systems functioned within established norms. The only peculiar detail was the unaccounted power interruption experienced by both aircraft, one at 80 miles from Tehran and the other at 25 miles, all of which coincided with their visual proximity to the unidentified object. The official assessment circulated as Defense Intelligence Summary. 56-76 enumerates 12 key data points that confirm radar and visual correlations, electromagnetic interference, multiple radar returns, and the effects exerted on weapon systems. It also encompasses reports from Tehran's civil aviation radar and commercial airline pilots, who similarly witnessed the luminous object during the incident. A particularly noteworthy section of the declassified document describes the intensity of the light, with pilots recounting that the brilliance illuminated the cockpit as if it were broad daylight. The object emitted multicolored flashes of blue, green, and red, shifting rhythmically in sequence. No sound, exhaust, or shockwave accompanied its maneuvers. The Iranian command concluded that the object exhibited flight characteristics that surpassed the capabilities of any known aircraft, including instantaneous acceleration, silent operation, and remarkable maneuverability. Following the encounter, a closed debrief was conducted by the Imperial Iranian Air Force, attended by United States military advisors. A brief memorandum from this meeting, titled Evaluation of Aerial Phenomena, dated the 19th of September 1976, noted that the observed phenomena could not be attributed to any known aircraft or natural occurrence. When the documents were declassified, analysts identified that the Defense Intelligence Agency report had been distributed to the United States Secretary of State, the Defense Intelligence Staff in London, and the Chief of the Air Force Systems Command. Such distribution was decidedly irregular for a foreign incident. The final paragraph of the declassified summary, now publicly accessible through the Black Vault, asserts that the data indicates an object of considerable size and brightness, which caused electromagnetic disturbances affecting multiple interceptor aircraft and was observed through both radar and visual means. Its behavior implies a controlled device of unknown origin. To this day, no explanation, either natural or artificial, has been found for the Tehran event. Astronomical data confirmed that no meteors, re-entries, or satellite reflections transpired that night. The recorded position and movements from radar and visual observations do not align with any celestial object. The United States Defense Intelligence Agency categorized this case as an anomalous aerial encounter, with its analysis distributed under Control Number 1, R6846136676. The Iranian Air Force archived the event under its own file reference case 53-11, which was later lost amid administrative changes following 1979. Both the United States and Iran, in the documents released many years later, concurred on the essential facts. Radar contact was established, visual confirmation was made, and multiple aircraft experienced system failures near the unidentified aerial object, which exhibited maneuvers inconsistent with known technology. The file persists as one of the most meticulously detailed and corroborated UFO incidents ever documented in official military correspondence. It stands as the sole instance in which two separate interceptor aircraft, each independently radar-locked, experienced a total failure of weapons and communication systems in the direct vicinity of an unidentified aerial object, a case that even the Defense Intelligence Agency characterized as classic. On September the 19th, 1976, at Tehran, two phantoms encountered one luminous object, marking a remarkable night when both radar and rational thought faced their limits. Fast forward to November 17, 1986, the transpolar air corridor over Alaska was clear and cold when Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a Boeing 747-200 cargo aircraft, registered as JA 8119, entered American airspace from the west. Piloting the aircraft were Captain Kenju Taruchi, First Officer Takanori Tamafuji, and Flight Engineer Yoshio Tsukuba, who were tasked with transporting French wine from Paris to Tokyo, with a refueling stop scheduled at Anchorage International Airport. At 1711 Alaska Standard Time, while cruising at 35,000 feet near Fort Yukon, Captain Tarucci contacted the Anchorage Air Route Traffic Control Center to inquire about any traffic at 11 o'clock, 10 nautical miles away. The controller perused the radar but found no known traffic in that sector. Moments later, the crew reported two luminous objects positioned off the left wing of their aircraft. Tarucci described these as two small lights, glowing in bright amber and white, darting rapidly and erratically. The radar at Anchorage picked up an uncorrelated primary target approximately 7 miles behind Japan Airlines Flight 1628, mirroring its ground speed of 500 knots. This contact lacked a transponder code, indicating it was not a registered aircraft. These radar returns are chronicled within Anchorage Radar Printout Segment A, lines 212 to 230, preserved in Federal Aviation Incident File 733,678-011. Initially, the objects seemed to glide ahead of the nose of the 747, only to shift right and remain visible for a few moments. Both Tarucci and Tamafuji observed as the two smaller lights appeared to coalesce into a singular colossal structure. In a statement penned on December 1, 1986 to the Federal Aviation Administration, Alaska Region Flight Standards District Office, the captain later recalled that the lights were arranged in a horizontal array, rectangular, and vast, perhaps the size of two aircraft carriers stacked one atop the other. At 1723, Anchorage instructed the 747 to execute a turn to discern whether the target could be an optical illusion. Tarucci performed a complete 360-degree maneuver. Remarkably, the unidentified object followed suit, retaining its relative position throughout the turn. The radar continued to exhibit intermittent returns corresponding to the heading of the 747. The controllers in Anchorage guided United Airlines Flight 69 and a U.S. Air Force C-130 to intercept. While United 69's radar briefly detected a secondary target in the same airspace, visual verification was never achieved. By 1739, the Anchorage controller relayed that the target appeared behind the 747 at 12 o'clock, 10 miles distant. Tari replied affirmatively, acknowledging they had traffic. As the Boeing veered south toward Talkeetna, the lights of the object intensified, illuminating the cockpit as if bathed in sunlight. The captain later conveyed to Japanese media, expressing that they felt heat against their faces from the dazzling, metallic, immense presence. This encounter endured for nearly 50 minutes. The radar returns gradually dissipated just north of Anchorage, at 62 degrees north latitude and 149 degrees west longitude, as the aircraft initiated its descent for landing. At 1824, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was safely on the ground. Within hours, the Federal Aviation Administration launched an internal review of the incident, cataloging it under Anchorage File AL 1628-86, which was subsequently linked to Case 2001-005317. The complete dossier encompasses radar data, air traffic control voice recordings, and written accounts from all three crew members. A memorandum dated December 29, 1986, encapsulated the findings. The flight crew reported an unidentified object that maintained pace with their aircraft for an approximate duration of 50 minutes. Supporting radar data confirmed uncorrelated primary targets in the vicinity. Notably, the object failed to respond to air traffic control communications. The Anchorage ARTCC Quality Assurance Review Board convened on December 22 and confirmed that all radar and communication systems operated normally. No equipment failures were detected, and no meteorological phenomena could account for the primary radar contact. The entire file was subsequently forwarded to Federal Aviation Administration headquarters in Washington, D.C. for in-depth analysis. Among the documents submitted were flight maps, voice transcripts, and a hand-drawn sketch of the object by Captain Tarucci, depicting an oval walnut-shaped form emitting a spectrum of colors and accompanied by two smaller orbs. John Callahan, who served as the division chief of the FAA Air Traffic Division at that time, later testified to his personal review of the tapes and radar plots. He recounted a closed meeting convened at the FAA headquarters involving representatives from the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Council, and the President's Scientific Study Group on Air Safety. His declassified memorandum, archived within the Black Vault, noted that the radar and voice data unmistakably illustrated an unknown target in close proximity to Japan Airlines Flight 1628 for an elongated duration. The event remained neither explained nor dismissed. Following this meeting, the incident was internally classified as unidentified radar contact, posing no hazard to air navigation. The original recordings were archived at the FAA Technical Center in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Meteorological analyses conducted by the National Weather Service ascertained that the skies remained clear and visibility exceeded 30 miles throughout central Alaska on that night. No auroral activity, meteor showers, or atmospheric re-entries were recorded. Additionally, astronomical data from the U.S. Naval Observatory eliminated the planet Jupiter and various celestial phenomena as potential explanations. A post-flight examination of Japan Airlines. Flight 1628 revealed no electrical, radar, or instrumentation issues with the onboard weather radar performing as expected. The Federal Aviation Administration's Alaska Region Summary Report, document number 1987-03, culminated in the assertion that radar data indicated uncorrelated primary returns and that identification was not achieved. The crew report was deemed reliable, leaving the event in a state of unresolved mystery. In 2001, the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, known as NARCAP, undertook a comprehensive analysis utilizing the released FAA data tapes, with investigator Paul Smith reconstructing the radar tracks and confirming consistent positional correlation between the uncorrelated target and Flight 1628. His analysis revealed that the object displayed deliberate maneuvering and maintained behavior of constant distance that was at odds with any meteorological or radar-related anomalies. Controllers in Anchorage, interviewed post-incident, confirmed that the radar signals were indeed authentic rather than mere clutter. Diagnostics performed on the equipment after the event indicated standard functionality. All official identifiers continue to remain accessible in public records. FAI Incident Identification 733,667-001, FOIA Case 2001-005317, AL. And Anchorage Radar File AL 1628-86. This comprehensive document comprises 156 pages, which include complete communication transcripts along with radar recordings. Although Captain Tarouch initially faced a decline in reputation due to public scrutiny, his license was subjected to a temporary suspension for evaluation. Ultimately, it was reinstated months later without restrictions. He never recanted his testimony, and to this day, neither civilian nor military entities have provided a clarifying explanation. The FAI categorizes the event as unidentified. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, dated November 17, 1986, over Alaska, a phenomenon witnessed by 3 observers across 2 radar stations, characterized by a structured object that accompanied a 747 for a duration of 50 minutes within controlled U.S. airspace. Documented in FAI File 733,667-001. The evidence is reinforced by radar data, complemented by audio-recorded communications, subsequently reviewed by Washington and subsequently classified as unexplained. Turning to the extraordinary Rendlesham Forest incident in Suffolk, United Kingdom, from December 26, 1980, in the early hours, both RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, bases leased to the United States Air Force and in a heightened state of readiness, were home to nuclear-capable aircraft of the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing. Shortly after 300 hours, security personnel stationed near the east gate of Woodbridge witnessed unusual lights descending into the dense pine forest separating the two bases. Airman First Class John Burroughs, Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, and Airman Edward Cabbins responded to the call for an investigation. Their initial report suggested a potential downed aircraft, and as they ventured into the forest, they encountered an object among the trees emitting a rhythmic red and blue light, moving without a sound. Burroughs recounted it as a metallic triangle, approximately 3 meters in width at its base, hovering just above the ground, surrounded by a glow reminiscent of heat radiating from metal. Peniston approached within mere meters of the object, and in his subsequent witness statement submitted to the U.S. Air Force on December 27, 1980, he documented that the object featured smooth, glass-like black surfaces adorned with peculiar symbols along its side. He meticulously sketched these symbols in his notebook, which later surfaced under FOYA. He estimated that their encounter lasted roughly 45 minutes before the object ascended silently through the trees and accelerated towards the coastline. At 411 hours, radar operators at RAF Watton and Bentwaters logged transient aerial returns in the vicinity of the forest, which were neither identified as aircraft, meteorological events, nor atmospheric phenomena. The subsequent night, December 27th, further unusual activities were reported, with local residents in Woodbridge describing flashes of light illuminating the forest canopy. Security patrols again noted glowing objects observed in the distance. However, it was the third night, December 28th, that yielded the evidence which would ultimately come to define the Rendlesham case. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander of RAF Woodbridge, was present at the officers' Christmas party when a security officer entered and announced that something was back. Halt promptly assembled a small team, equipped with a portable radiation meter, and followed the patrol into the woods. By 0300 hours, they reached the area where indentations had previously been detected in the soil. Utilizing an APDR-27 radiation meter, Halt recorded readings between 0.07 to 0.10 million per hour, approximately 10 times the standard background levels. These measurements were meticulously documented in his notebook and later submitted as part of an official memorandum. In Halt's on-site audio narration, recorded on a handheld micro-cassette recorder, his voice distinctly outlined the unfolding events. He described observing a light emanating from deep within the forest, characterized by an unusual red glow, approximately 200 meters away, which exhibited noticeable movement. The light pulsated, intermittently discharging sparks. Shortly thereafter, his tone shifted to an air of astonishment as he relayed observing what seemed to be a beam extending down to the ground, exclaiming how unreal the situation was. The recording, now commonly referred to as the Halt tape, was publicly released in 1983 and was later authenticated by both the BBC and the Ministry of Defense. Halt and his team reported that the luminous object appeared to glide quietly between the trees, intermittently casting beams of light towards the ground and a nearby weapons storage area. At one point, Halt communicated with the Bentwaters command post, receiving reports that beams were being detected across the base itself. By 0300 hours, the mysterious lights vanished towards the coast, following the same trajectory observed on the initial night. 10 days subsequently, on January 13, 1981, Halt submitted his formal memorandum to the Ministry of Defense, titled Unexplained Lights. This succinct 2-page report encapsulated the sequence of events spanning the 3 nights, inclusive of precise timings, compass orientations, and measurable data, highlighting recorded indentations in the ground and elevated radiation levels. The document, marked unclassified for official use only, later found its place in MOD file DFE 241948. An internal summary released under FOIA in 2001 asserted that the Ministry of Defense possessed no information indicating that the events within Rendlesham Forest bore any defense significance. Nonetheless, despite this declaration, the file remained open internally for several years under the classification of Defense of the Realm UFO reports. In 1983, a leaked copy of Halt's memorandum captured the attention of the British newspaper News of the World, elevating the incident to public awareness. That same year, the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations confirmed the genuineness of the memo but chose to refrain from further commentary. In 1984, the British Ministry of Defence took steps to declassify parts of the file in accordance with the new Public Records Act. This move allowed researchers to uncover references to radar returns from locations such as Bentwaters, Nidus Head, and Watton, all of which indicated aerial anomalies coinciding with the chronology of the Halt patrol. Subsequent releases, filed under mod reference DEF 31/189, revealed correspondence exchanged between Ministry of Defense officials and representatives of the United States Air Force, an internal memo authored by Wing Commander D.M. Clark on February 23, 1981, poignantly noted that Colonel Halt conveyed a belief in the occurrence of something significant. Although no definitive evidence pointed to an incursion, the uniformity of witness testimonies was remarkable. The Rendlesham incident proceeded to generate one of the most thorough compilations of physical and testimonial evidence associated with any UFO event within Europe. Soil samples taken from the landing site were gathered meticulously by U.S. Air Force security personnel. Analysis performed in laboratories recorded instances of minor surface vitrification, presumably resulting from exposure to intense heat. Observations of tree bark in the surrounding area revealed elevated radiation levels, which aligned with the readings obtained by Halt's meter. Skeptical interpretations have proposed various explanations ranging from misidentified lighthouse beams originating from the nearby Orford Ness to possibilities involving meteors, aircraft lights, or even hoaxes. Nevertheless, the Ministry of Defense's Atmospheric Division later confirmed that the visibility conditions and bearing on that night rendered the lighthouse explanation inconsistent with both witness angles and the duration of sightings. In 1994, as part of ongoing Freedom of Information Act inquiries, the ministry admitted that radar logs from RAF Nidus Head recorded multiple returns zipping across East Anglia during the early hours of December 26th, showcasing altitudes between 3,000 and 10,000 feet, none of which corresponded with known aircraft. In 2010, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt put his name to a formal affidavit asserting his belief that the objects encountered were indeed under intelligent control and not of earthly origin. He further corroborated reports that beams of light descended into the weapons storage area at Bentwaters, where tactical nuclear ordnance was housed. This assertion remained consistent with security log entries that documented light infiltration within the restricted zone. The United States Air Force's 81st Security Police Squadron blotter for the period spanning December 26 to 28, 1980, maintained within Freedom of Information Act releases, contained references to UFO sighting. Entries as well as orders for conducting radiation sweeps. This blotter was categorized under reference 81 SPS/UF FO 80-12 and later cited in archives of the United States Air Force Europe. In 2011, the British National Archives released a trove of 210 pages of Ministry of Defense correspondence under file DEF 24/2086, which confirmed that the ministry sustained ongoing dialogue with the United States concerning the incident until 1983, a duration extending well beyond what had been publicly recognized. Independent evaluations of Halt's original microcassette confirmed that the recording device had captured authentic ambient field audio from 1980, validated by frequency degradation characteristic of aging magnetic tape. Every document, memo, audio recording, radar log, and soil test that has survived is now accessible to the public. None yields a conventional explanation for the events in question. From the inaugural sighting through to the final radio transmission, Rendlesham Forest stands out as the most meticulously documented case of a UFO encounter occurring at a nuclear-armed military installation within Western Europe. In December 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel stood by with nuclear weapons on alert, encircled by a forest illuminated by lights, and a voice audible on tape remarked quietly that something was approaching, noting the presence of multiple beams descending, which was described as unreal. The event has been captured, reported, measured, archived, and eventually declassified. 4 decades later, the file remains open to myriad interpretations. Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, United Kingdom, 1980. Documented within Ministry of Defense files, DF 24/1948, DEF 31/91, and DEF 24/2086, investigated by the United States Air Force's 81st Tactical Fighter Wing. Acknowledged by the Ministry of Defense and yet still shrouded in mystery. The Phoenix Lights, Arizona, United States, in 1997. On March 13, 1997, shortly after 8:00 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, residents throughout the state of Arizona commenced calling law enforcement and television stations. Descriptions from witnesses portrayed a configuration of silent lights gliding slowly across the night sky, traversing the distance from Henderson, Nevada, to Phoenix, and further southward toward Tucson. The phenomenon began in the northwest. Observers in Henderson, situated on the outskirts of Las Vegas, witnessed a massive object illuminated by 6 lights moving southeast at a low altitude. A police dispatcher recorded the first report at 19:55 Pacific Standard Time, which was logged in the incident file of the Clark County Sheriff's Department, labeled 1997-130147. Just moments later, observers in Kingman and Prescott Valley echoed the same account. A former pilot provided insight to the Daily Courier, citing that it was not merely one light, but rather a solid V-shaped structure that obstructed the view of the stars. By 8:19 p.m., the object entered the airspace over the Phoenix metropolitan area, clearly visible from the northwest to the southeast, extending over 250 miles. The Federal Aviation Administration's Southwest Regional Center in Albuquerque noted its first official inquiry at 2030, when controllers at Phoenix Sky Harbor reported that airline pilots were requesting information regarding unidentified traffic descending below 10,000 feet. The FAA noted no radar returns within that corridor. Their log entry read that no primary or secondary targets were detected corresponding to the visual reports over the Phoenix area, and no IFR, Instrument Flight Rules, or VFR, Visual Flight Rules, traffic matched. During the subsequent half an hour, witnesses across the city described an enormous triangular or boomerang-shaped object gliding silently overhead. Some estimated it to be at a height of 1,500 feet, while others believed it exceeded an altitude of 10,000 feet. Nearly all who viewed the spectacle agreed that it emitted between 5 and 7 steady amber lights, which did not blink. At 8:37 p.m., a family in Paradise Valley managed to film the lights as they crossed behind Camelback Mountain. The video had a timestamp reading 20 hours, 37 minutes, and 18 seconds MST, which aligns with the hundreds of calls received that evening by the National UFO Reporting Center, UFOC, based in Seattle. Director Peter Davenport logged over 770 separate reports from Arizona within a mere 48 hours. Amongst the most detailed accounts was provided by Dr. Lynn Keaty, a physician from Phoenix who had been capturing footage of similar formations near South Mountain since 1995. Her videotape from March 13, 1997, recorded 5 amber orbs arranged in a precise V formation moving southward. Airline and military pilots also witnessed the intriguing phenomenon. Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, a pilot in the Arizona Air National Guard, recounted to investigators that while approaching Sky Harbor, he observed a series of lights positioned to the west. These lights appeared uniform and spaced at equal intervals, distinguishable from either flares or the typical navigation lights of aircraft. Subsequently, investigators reviewed the civil radar information from Sky Harbortron and Luke Air Force Base, which contributed to the ongoing inquiry conducted by the EFA-Wise Western Pacific Division. The official log for the Phoenix Tron facility, declassified in 2000 through FOIU case 2000-00060F, stated that no radar correlation was found and no primary target mirrored the movement reported, thus presenting no evidence of unusual activity within the controlled airspace. At 8:38 in the evening, various residents situated north of Phoenix noted that the object tilted southward and vanished over the Sierra Estrella mountain range. Approximately 2 hours later, at 10 in the evening, another incident transpired. A line of stationary lights materialized high above the Estrella Mountains, observable by thousands throughout the city. This second array of lights was filmed by numerous witnesses, including local television channels KSAZ and KNXV. Initially, the United States Air Force denied any operations occurring in that vicinity. 3 months later, Lieutenant Keith Shepard, a spokesperson for Luke Air Force Base, disclosed that on the night of March 13th, an A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft from the 104th Fighter Squadron of the Maryland Air National Guard was engaged in training at the Barry M. Goldwater Range, approximately 60 miles southwest of Phoenix, as part of Operation Snowbird. He explained that the pilots deployed LUU 2B/B illumination flares between 9:30 and 10. This rationale, however, only accounted for the second occurrence, the cluster of hovering lights over the mountains, failing to clarify the earlier formation seen traversing the state around 8 o'clock. Radar data procured through FOIU from the Western Air Defense Sector and NORAD indicated no tracks pertaining to a substantial formation above Arizona between the hours of 8 and 9 in the evening, Mountain Standard Time. The NORAD communication summary that was released in 2001 stated there was no evidence of any track related to unidentified aircraft coinciding with the reported visual phenomena. No scrambles were ordered, nor did any respective flight plans match the sighting. Despite the void of radar data, the uniformity among eyewitness accounts captured significant national interest. The Phoenix Police Department, the Arizona Department of Public Safety, and even Governor F. Symington received an extensive number of written testimonies. On March 14th, the FAA's Southwest region issued a public statement attributing the lights to civil aircraft flying in formation or possibly military exercises. Yet, no such formations were recorded by any flight services or control towers that night. Governor Symington, a former Air Force pilot, initially downplayed the situation during a televised press conference, even staging a mock appearance alongside a staffer dressed as an extraterrestrial. However, a decade later, in 2007, he shifted his stance, declaring publicly that the sighting was enormous and beyond explanation. He affirmed that he observed it himself and asserted it was neither flares nor military maneuvers, nor could it be categorized as a conventional aircraft. The Phoenix Lights incident thus separates into two verified timelines, the first event occurring between 8 and 8:45, which involved an immense V-shaped craft moving across the state, and the second event occurring around 10 in the evening featuring stationary lights over the Estrella Mountains. FAI radar archives maintained within the Albuquerque Air Route Traffic Control Center confirm radar gaps below 18,000 feet along the Prescott-Phoenix corridor due to the surrounding terrain. This lack of data neither substantiates nor refutes the presence of any object at a lower elevation. Witness reports from Prescott Valley, recorded by the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, depicted a solid and silent craft as large as several football fields, with one off-duty airline captain estimating its wingspan at over a mile. Video analysis conducted by Dr. Bruce McCabe, a former optical physicist in the U.S. Navy, determined that the later formation of lights over the Estrella at 10 o'clock descended gradually and extinguished in a sequential manner, aligning with the drift of flares. Yet, McCabe emphasized that the earlier event at 8 o'clock remains unexplained by the flare theory. The Arizona Republic's front page on June 18, 1997, quoted a senior FAA official, who spoke under a cloak of anonymity, stating there was undoubtedly something in the sky that night, but they were unable to ascertain what it was. By the mid-year of 1998, over 1,600 eyewitness statements had been submitted to New4C, the Mutual UFO Network (MUON), and the Center for UFO Studies (KUFOS). The descriptions offered by witnesses were strikingly consistent: a massive, silent triangular craft with 5 lights adorning its leading edge, gliding slowly overhead. The official review conducted by the Air Force, issued by Lieutenant Colonel David Evans of Luke Air Force Base Public Affairs, concluded that the only aircraft operational in proximity to Phoenix at that time were A-10s involved in nighttime illumination training at the Goldwater Range. The flares discharged around 2200 hours sufficiently accounted for the reports of stationary lights observed to the southwest. However, no operations were logged at or prior to 2030 in the Phoenix or Prescott areas. When investigators inquired whether radar would have detected large objects at lower altitudes, Evans acknowledged that it was conceivable for a formation flying below 10,000 feet to evade primary radar detection due to the surrounding terrain. The Federal Aviation Administration's Air Traffic Evaluation Branch maintained that radar tapes from Sky Harbor were routinely overwritten within 15 days, rendering any recoverable data from the 8 o'clock hour impossible. By 1999, the Black Vault acquired, through FOIU, the FAA's correspondence regarding the incidents from March 13th to 14th in 1997, including internal memos that referenced public interest in unidentified aerial lights and directives to forward all inquiries to the Public Affairs Division in Washington. The case remained active, permeating media and official discussions for several years. In 2001, the National Guard Bureau reaffirmed that the lights observed at 10 p.m. were flares deployed by the 104th Fighter Squadron. However, they emphasized their lack of insight into the earlier events of that night. The year 2007 marked a resurgence of national intrigue when Governor Symington made a televised revelation. He expressed that it was a craft of unidentified origin, astonishingly larger than anything he had ever encountered, gliding silently and purposefully through the night, invoking feelings of wonder in all who witnessed it. Thorough astronomical assessments dismissed any possibility of Venus, meteors, or even navigational lights from aircraft being responsible for the sightings. Astronomers at the Lell Observatory in Flagstaff also confirmed that Venus was not observable at the reported altitude or direction at 8:30 in the evening that fateful night. In 2012, the FOIU Office of the National Archives published a comprehensive summary of communications between NORAD, Air Mobility Command, and the FAI Albuquerque Center. This overview highlighted numerous visual accounts of unidentified lights moving across Arizona and southern Nevada from 8 to 8:45 MST, and crucially noted the absence of any military or civilian aircraft correlating with these sightings. As the 20th anniversary of the incident approached, the Phoenix Lights file became recognized as one of the most extensive civilian UFO case archives globally, amassing over 10,000 pages of witness testimonies, radar data, and correspondence from both the FAI and the Air Force. Notably, there has never been an official conclusion regarding the identity or nature of the first event. 2 undeniable facts continue to stand unchallenged. Hundreds of eyewitnesses beheld a structured, silent formation passing directly over residential areas, while investigations yielded no radar, military operations, or astronomical explanations for the earlier 8 o'clock p.m. phenomenon. The Phoenix Police Department, Arizona's Department of Public Safety, and the EFAI Southwest Regional Office continue to maintain files of reports classified as unidentified aerial lights, March 13, 1997. For the majority, this night remains etched in memory as a time of quiet wonder. For investigators, it represents one of the most significant mass sightings recorded in contemporary history. 2 distinct occurrences, separated by a span of 2 hours, with only one elucidated. Phoenix, Arizona, March 13, 1997. A formation stretching a mile across glides over the desert in total silence. With radar readings blank, pilots observing intently, cameras capturing every moment, and thousands of witnesses left with lingering questions, the answers remain elusive. Fast forward to the encounter involving the USS Nimitz off the southern coast of California in 2004. On November 14, 2004, situated 80 miles offshore from San Diego, the USS Nimitz's carrier strike group CSG-11 was engaged in combat air defense exercises, preparing for deployment to the Western Pacific. This group comprised the USS Nimitz CVN-68, the USS Princeton CG-59, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser outfitted with the ASPY-1B radar system, accompanied by FA-18F Super Hornets from VFA-41 Black Aces. At approximately 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, radar operators on the Princeton began detecting unidentified aerial tracks materializing at 80,000 feet, plummeting rapidly to sea level before hovering completely still. These radar contacts remained stationary for several minutes, only to then accelerate to speeds beyond human comprehension. Initially, Radar Chief Senior Chief Kevin Day presumed the tracks were either radar clutter or false returns. However, the crew of the Princeton recalibrated the SPY-1 system, cleared the airspace, and conducted further scans. The unidentified returns remained consistent and clear, showcasing capabilities unprecedented in known aircraft. In the days that followed, several radar contacts surfaced in roughly the same vicinity, about 100 by 100 meters southwest of San Clemente Island. From November 10th to November 14th, these contacts were consistently logged as AAV, or anomalous aerial vehicles, in the Princeton's radar notebook. By November 14th, Commander David Fravor, the commanding officer of VFA-41, along with his wingman, Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, received directives to investigate. At 1200 hours, 2 FA-18 aircraft launched from the Nimitz. Princeton's Air Intercept Controller, known by the call sign Poison, directed them towards the radar contacts, approximately 80 meters southwest of the carrier. Fast Eagle 0, 1, and 2, Vector 270, Angels 20, the merge plot came through the transmission. As the Super Hornets approached the scene, they witnessed a disturbance in the ocean's surface, with white water churning in stark contrast to the otherwise calm sea. The pilots described the anomaly as something submerged, potentially as large as a 737, moving just below the water's surface. Hovering just above this turmoil was a small white oblong object, about 40 feet in length, with a smooth and featureless appearance, resembling a tic-tac candy. It maneuvered erratically, devoid of any visible wings, exhaust, or propellers. Commander Fravor began a descent to investigate. As he neared within half a mile, Fravor later recounted to the New York Times that it suddenly accelerated in a manner unlike anything he had ever witnessed, vanishing from both visual perception and radar tracking. Moments later, the Princeton communicated back, indicating that the object had reappeared 60 miles away near the pilot's pre-established training area, arriving in mere seconds. Upon their return to the Nimitz, another flight, Fast Eagle 0, 3, and 4, launched shortly thereafter, equipped this time with the ATFL-IR targeting pod, capable of infrared video capture. At 13:08 Pacific Standard Time, the FLIR camera recorded what would evolve into one of the most iconic pieces of military footage in contemporary history: a small, white, featureless object darting rapidly above the ocean. This thermal footage demonstrates the object maintaining altitude, subsequently rotating and then accelerating out of frame. Labeled FLIR 1, this video is part of the Navy's original event summary, dated November 14, 2004, later declassified through FOIA case Don Navy 2019-00003 and officially released by the Department of Defense in 2020. Back aboard the Princeton, the radar logs indicated that the unidentified object plummeted from 28,000 feet to nearly sea level in less than 0.8 of a second, suggesting acceleration far exceeding known aerodynamic limits, over 5,000 Gs is later analyzed by the Navy. Concurrently, sonar operators on the USS Louisville, a fast attack submarine in the vicinity, were questioned. They reported a lack of undersea contacts, effectively ruling out the possibility of any subsurface vehicles. An official after-action report from the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group circulated in December 2004 and was later leaked in 2017, summarizing that the anomalous aerial vehicles exhibited advanced performance characteristics. No existing aircraft or system could match the flight profile or acceleration that was recorded. The aerial phenomena appeared to possess the capability to cloak or become invisible to radar and infrared detection. The radar data acquired from both the Princeton and the E-2C Hawkeye early warning aircraft were subsequently sent to the Naval Intelligence Center, NIWC, for detailed analysis. Segments of this data continue to remain classified. Within 24 hours, a team of unidentified personnel, whom witnesses speculated to be from the Office of Naval Intelligence or a liaison office within the Defense Department, arrived on the Princeton. Radar technician Gary Voris recalled that his command received orders to eliminate all data related to the anomalous aerial vehicles, including radar tapes and electronic logs. The technicians complied, taking everything, including backup tapes. Voris noted they were instructed not to discuss the incident. The occurrence lay dormant for over a decade until the New York Times unveiled the story on December 16, 2017, under the headline, "Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program." This article disclosed that the encounter had been part of a study by the Defense Department known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. The Department of Defense later affirmed the authenticity of the video, radar data, and pilot debriefings as legitimate U.S. Navy materials. In 2019, the U.S. Navy's Office of Information, in response to FOIA request number 2019-0003, officially categorized the footage as unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP, confirming that the video was taken by a Navy aircraft in 2004. Further validation emerged from Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Alex Dietrich, who documented their accounts with the Department of Defense in 2021. Dietrich remarked they were both taken aback, noting the lack of flight surfaces or exhaust plumes on the object, which performed maneuvers that contradicted conventional physics. Radar operator Kevin Day recalled that in the 10 days leading up to November 14th, his screens tracked over 100 separate contacts descending from the stratosphere to sea level. His report, officially logged internally as part of the USS Princeton Radar Anomaly Log, referred to those contacts with IDS listed from track 4408 through 4487. The AATIP files, which were later declassified, indicated that the tic-tac objects displayed instantaneous changes in velocity and hypersonic speeds, devoid of any visible propulsion. An internal U.S. Air Force intelligence assessment, referenced within a Defense Intelligence Reference document written under an Advanced Weapons System Special Access Program contract, concluded that the Nimitz incident illustrated technologies of advanced inertia control. Despite skeptics suggesting alternative explanations like misidentified weather balloons or classified drones, the Navy's radar telemetry and infrared imagery ruled out those possibilities. The object showed no aerodynamic control surfaces, emitted no heat plume, and maneuvered without creating a sonic boom or any observable wake. A subsequent briefing slide from the Naval Air Systems Command, leaked in 2019, encapsulated the core observations. The object was noted to have no visible propulsion mechanism, yet exhibited sustained lift, instantaneous acceleration, and directional control. No known technology could emulate the performance recorded. In 2020, the U.S. Navy officially recognized the Nimitz video alongside two others, dubbed Gamble and Go Fast, as genuine and publicly released them through the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service, DVIDS. When CNN inquired as to why the videos were not classified, Pentagon spokesperson Susan Goff explained that the videos were cleared for release due to their lack of revealing capabilities or systems. The aerial phenomena observed remained unidentified. According to the U.S. Navy's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, established in 2020, the Nimitz case stands as an unresolved incident of defense significance. FOIA records maintained at the Black Vault under case number D Navy 2019-0003 comprise the FLIR 1 video data from November 14, 2004, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group After-Action Report from December 2004, and the Naval Intelligence Event Summary, as well as a memorandum concerning unidentified aerial vehicle performance from 2009. All of these documents remain marked as unidentified. No further information is currently available. The event is considered the most thoroughly documented modern UAP encounter, involving a constellation of sensor systems, visual confirmations, radar tracking, and official debriefings by trained military pilots. No experimental aircraft known to the United States or its allies can match the performance captured in recorded data. The object accelerated from a standstill to Mach 20, executed right-angle turns, and vanished without producing sound. In its 2021 report, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence referenced the Nimitz event as one of 144 cases that defied attribution to any known aerospace source. Commander Fravor succinctly articulated the phenomenon by stating that whatever it was, it did not belong to us. It moved in a manner unlike anything we had ever constructed, and it appeared aware of our presence. From November 10 to 14, 2004, over the Pacific, off the coast of California, cutting-edge radar, infrared cameras, and human observation all converged upon the same target, an unadorned, smooth white oval craft that defied aerodynamics and vanished without a trace. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group 11 was linked to Event ID 041103N, dated November 14, 2004, and logged under the FOIA request case number D Navy 2019-0003. Multiple sensors, numerous witnesses, one object, still unexplained. Between arrivals and departures, ramp workers navigated the bustling airport, tucked beneath a shroud of low-hanging clouds as they readied outbound flights for the evening rush. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Central Standard Time, an employee stationed at Gate C-17 of United Airlines Terminal 1 concourse paused and craned his neck skyward. He would later document his observations in a report for his supervisor, recounting the peculiar sight that had caught his eye. What he beheld was a metallic disc-shaped object, hovering soundlessly just below the overcast layer directly above the gate. This object, circular and smooth, exhibited sharply defined edges without any illumination, markings, or accompanying noise. In the FAI's event record, indicative of Chi 20613, the witness characterized it as a metallic entity, tinted gray, remaining completely still with no discernible motion or sound. Moments later, news of the sighting circulated swiftly among the ramp crew. Mechanics, baggage handlers, and gate agents emerged from their workstations to witness the phenomenon. Even several pilots preparing their aircraft for departure stepped out, joining the curious onlookers. Positioned at various vantage points around the terminal, they gazed upon the object, which remained suspended in the air against the dull gray backdrop, a seamless disk against a canvas of solid cloud. At that particular moment, the official weather observation, referenced as MER Cord 72230Z, recorded an overcast ceiling at 1,900 feet, with winds from the west at 8 knots and a temperature of 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Beneath this blanket of clouds, the object hung in eerie silence. At 4:32 p.m., a supervisor for United Airlines radioed the Operations Center, OPC, to ascertain whether any aircraft might be loitering over the terminal. The control tower coordinated with Chicago Approach Control, responsible for monitoring radar traffic within a 50-mile radius. Both parties reported identical findings: no radar targets, no transponder codes, and no aircraft detected in that zone. One mechanic, interviewed afterward by the Chicago Tribune, remarked that it was simply perched there, completely motionless. He emphasized his familiarity with aircraft and asserted that what he observed was not of this world. It was devoid of sound. Numerous witnesses remained transfixed, observing as the object maintained its position for nearly 5 uninterrupted minutes. Then, with no forewarning, it accelerated vertically, not in a gradual ascent, but instantaneously, rocketing straight up into the clouds. As it disappeared from sight, it seemed to carve out a perfect circular hole in the overcast, the edges appearing sharply defined. This opening persisted in visibility for over 10 minutes. One employee described the phenomenon as if someone had excised a fragment of the sky. Within 20 minutes, the occurrence became a hot topic of discussion across the concourse, with gate agents relaying their accounts to supervisors and pilots reaching out to the tower for confirmation on whether it had been observed from their position on the field. Around 4:45 p.m., the FAI duty supervisor at O'Hare received a prompt inquiry from United's operations manager, subsequently entering a brief notation into the day's operations log. At approximately 4:30 Central Standard Time, United Airlines personnel reported an unidentified aerial object hovering above Concourse C-17. No radar confirmation was achieved, and the incident had no impact on flight operations. United Airlines recorded the event internally as UA Event 11/7/6 C-17. 12 employees submitted statements regarding the sighting, which were directed to United's Corporate Safety and Flight Standards Division, a body that opted against making any public comment. At 5:12 p.m., the National UFO Reporting Center and UFO RC in Seattle took a phone call from an airline employee who chose to remain anonymous. This call was transcribed and logged under Report 97,287, detailing a metallic disc-shaped object hovering above Terminal 1 for approximately 5 minutes, before ascending vertically and leaving behind AE. Circular imprint in the clouds. The New Fork logs indicated that 3 additional reports arose that night from civilian witnesses near the airport. The following morning, November 8th, an inquiry arrived from the Airline Pilots Association, ALPPE, Safety Office. A representative from the union sought an official statement from the air traffic manager at O'Hare. The response was terse. The EFA had no evidence of any unidentified aircraft, asserting that the system had functioned normally behind the scenes. However, internal communications revealed a more cautious narrative. Emails disclosed under FOIA, Case 2007-0182F, highlighted the agency's full awareness of the incident's scope. One message dispatched on November 8, 2006 at 8:13 a.m. by FAI spokeswoman Elizabeth Isham Corey stated that the FAI was not embarking on any formal investigation concerning the event, citing a lack of radar evidence for any anomaly. Another correspondence, sent 2 hours later by an operations manager in the Great Lakes Regional Office, read that there were numerous reports from United personnel, including mechanics and pilots, with anticipated media inquiries. By November 13th, investigative reporter John Hilkovich of the Chicago Tribune had caught wind of the narrative. After interviewing several United Airlines employees, Hilkovich verified that multiple eyewitnesses, each possessing aviation experience, described the same unexplainable object. His report, published on January 1, 2007, elaborated on the account of an airline mechanic who had observed the craft from the tarmac. He had been stationed at O'Hare for 15 years and asserted he had never seen anything resembling it. It was not a weather balloon, nor was it an aircraft. When approached by the media, the FAI initially refrained from commenting before releasing a formal statement on January 3, 2007. Suggesting that witnesses may have encountered a weather phenomenon known as a hole punch cloud, possibly resulting from departing aircraft. Meteorologists analyzing the data found, however, that a formation of that nature would necessitate a temperature inversion alongside a cirrus layer composed of supercooled water droplets, conditions absent that afternoon. The National Weather Service office in Romeoville, Illinois, confirmed that the atmosphere above Chicago was too warm for ice crystal fall streaks and that no convective activity had been documented. The NARCAP technical report, numbered 18 in 2007 and authored by Dr. Richard Haynes, a former NASA scientist, evaluated radar records, tower logs, and meteorological data. The report concluded that multiple independent witnesses recounted a structured metallic object exhibiting controlled motion, noting that no meteorological or astronomical explanation sufficiently accounted for the bizarre incident. The document indicated that gaps in radar coverage over the terminal might have obstructed the detection of an object flying at a low altitude, yet this observation alone did not account for the visible discontinuity in the overcast sky. Within the organizational framework of the FAI, a review was conducted under File QARD 20612 by the Quality Assurance Office. The conclusive notation stated that both radar and tower visual observations yielded negative results. The credibility of witnesses was rated as high, based on their positions and training, though ultimately, no definitive conclusion could be drawn. By February 2007, the incident had captured the interest of the Associated Press, national television networks, and even members of Congress, all seeking clarity regarding EFOW policies concerning unidentified aerial objects. The FAI restated its position that it does not investigate UFO sightings, resulting in the formal closure of the case. Fast forward to 2011, an updated FOIU release affirmed that no deletions or alterations to radar data had occurred, directly countering previous speculative narratives. The logs displayed a mere absence of targets. Nonetheless, the accounts provided by mechanics, pilots, and airline managers remained strikingly uniform, with descriptions of an object measuring between 20 and 30 feet in diameter, metallic gray in hue, hovering motionlessly for several minutes prior to ascending into the clouds with exceptional speed, leaving behind a clearly defined circular aperture. This hole in the clouds was perceptible throughout the airport, with passengers gathered in Concourse C's upper lounge catching sight of it through the glass and inquiring with the staff about the phenomenon. Numerous employees recollected the sunlight filtering through the gap, casting a radiant beam onto the terminal floor. Although photographic evidence remains unverified, at least one image showcasing a circular breach in the overcast sky circulated among personnel during the weeks subsequent to the event. Its validity has never been confirmed. For investigators, this incident is significant due to its context. Class B controlled airspace, monitored by some of the most sophisticated radar and surveillance technologies available in civil aviation, situated directly above one of the world's busiest airports. If the witnesses' assertions hold true, an unidentified object maneuvered skillfully in this airspace for several minutes without recognition or identification. By 2010, the sighting at O'Hare had become a reference point in academic discussions of aviation safety reporting and was featured in NARCAP's briefings to the International Civil Aviation Organization. It was heralded as a prime instance of underreporting due to the stigma attached to such phenomena. The case is preserved as one of the most credible mass sightings in the history of U.S. commercial aviation. It is documented in EFAWY records, corroborated by airline operational logs, and bolstered by independent meteorological analysis. The final announcement from the FAI, archived at the Black Vault, simply states that radar and tower records indicated no anomalies. Reports were received from airline personnel, and the incident was regarded as closed, carrying no threat to air navigation. Yet for those who witnessed it, the experience remains unresolved. The image is indelibly etched in their memories, a silent metallic disc hovering in daylight above one of the world's busiest airports before vanishing into the clouds as if the sky itself opened to allow its departure. O'Hare International Airport, Chicago, Illinois, November 7, 2006. Dozens of witnesses, a lack of radar documentation, a perfectly formed circle in the clouds, alongside an object that for a few fleeting moments appeared to elude every device designed to detect it. The USS Theodore Roosevelt, UAP encounters, Western Atlantic, USA, 2014 to 2015. The year was 2014. Positioned off the eastern seaboard of the United States, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, CVN-71, with her strike group had embarked on pre-deployment training. Countless weeks dedicated to flight operations, combat simulations, and radar calibration exercises over the Atlantic ensued. For the pilots of Carrier Air Wing 11, the training zones referred to as W-72 and W-386 were well-known airspace, meticulously mapped, controlled, and deemed safe. Yet without forewarning, that semblance of safety evaporated. What commenced as sporadic radar anomalies gradually transformed into a discernible pattern. Unidentified contacts surfaced on advanced systems, remaining stationary, drifting, or darting between altitudes devoid of propulsion or heat signatures. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, a Super Hornet pilot with VFA-11 Red Rippers, later recounted the evolution of these sightings with deliberate clarity. These objects were present every day. Pilots would ascend and observe them residing aloft, visible on radar at times and occasionally with the naked eye. What started as sheer curiosity soon morphed into concern. The preliminary reports were logged in mid-2014. Hazard reports from the Navy, obtained under FOIA Case DNA, VY 2019-00003, confirmed the sequence of events. Super Hornet pilots consistently tracked small, spherical, unidentified objects at altitudes ranging from 11,000 to 25,000 feet, often stationary or moving sluggishly against strong winds. These objects were detected by A/APG-79 AESA radars, sometimes locked onto by ATF Flyer infrared targeting pods, and were occasionally visible to the naked eye, described as white, spherical, or translucent, likened to a cube encased within. A clear sphere, according to multiple accounts. During one particularly close encounter on April 27, 2014, a VFA-11 aircraft narrowly avoided collision with an object at 16,000 feet. The pilot documented a near mid-air report detailing an unknown aerial vehicle approximately 5 to 15 feet in diameter, devoid of wings or exhaust, passing between two aircraft separated by about 100 feet. The radar return validated the object's location, while its transponder remained silent. This report was registered in the Naval Safety Center database, categorized as hazardous airborne contact unidentified. Navy radar operators began observing these contacts on a near-daily basis. They were not flares, balloons, or birds. The radar cross-section was solid, consistent, and frequently tracked across various systems. Some hovered effortlessly at zero airspeed while others swiftly accelerated, traversing dozens of miles in mere seconds. The aircrews began to casually refer to these enigmatic entities simply as UFOs, eventually adopting the term unidentified aerial phenomena in line with Navy nomenclature. By late 2014, mounting frustration permeated the ranks. Pilots found themselves confronting these objects within restricted military airspace, zones explicitly designated to prohibit civilian aircraft. Lieutenant Danny Aucoin, another pilot from the Roosevelt, recounted his initial encounters, details of which were subsequently corroborated by the Department of Defense. We would acquire radar locks with reliable returns, yet when we approached the designated coordinates, nothing would be there. Then, there were times when we visually spotted it, a white sphere lingering against the wind at 15,000 feet. As the Roosevelt geared up for deployment in January 2015, the reporting methods became increasingly systematic. The ship had shifted operational maneuvers to the Western Atlantic off Jacksonville, Florida, for an exercise aptly named Compux, serving as a final readiness assessment for combat. During this period, Navy pilots commenced capturing footage using their aircraft's ATF Flyer targeting systems. One of these recordings, taken in January 2015, would later gain widespread notoriety as the gimbal video. The footage, officially released by the Department of Defense in April 2020, depicts a luminous oblong object traversing above the cloud cover, its rotation prompting the pilots to express disbelief in their commentary. Through the cockpit intercom, one can catch the sound of nervous laughter as they exclaim their observations regarding the object's rotation. The video metadata, vetted by Naval Air Systems Command, confirms its location off the Florida coast during Roosevelt's Comp-2X deployment. Another recording from that same time frame, identified as the Go Fast video, features yet another unidentified object skimming low across the ocean's surface, its movement steadily monitored by AT FLIR. Both videos underwent scrutiny by Navy intelligence analysts and were subsequently released through NAV-FOIU Case 2020-0003, noted officially as the phenomena observed remaining classified as unidentified. Radar technicians aboard Roosevelt's accompanying vessels, including E-2C Hawkeye aircrews and ground-based radar operators, verified persistent tracks within Roosevelt's training areas. These were definitively not mere radar anomalies or artifacts of software glitches. Their signatures correlated with solid airborne entities, at times reflecting radar energy and at other moments vanishing without a trace. The occurrence was no longer an isolated incident. Throughout the Roosevelt's 2014 to 2015 training cycle, numerous Navy air crews encountered these identical contacts. They emerged on radar systems, in infrared assessments, and occasionally to the naked eye. They did not adhere to conventional flight paths, failed to respond to radio communications, and bore no transponder signals. For many aviators, these encounters transitioned from mere intrigue to serious safety concerns. Lieutenant Graves recalled a squadron briefing following one particularly close call. That incident marked a critical juncture. We began to regard these occurrences as safety risks. We were entirely unsure of their nature, but they could no longer be disregarded. The records from the Naval Safety Center echo this rising concern. One entry delineates multiple unidentified aerial objects observed by VFA 111 and VFA 106 during W-72 training exercises. Objects were stationary at assorted altitudes with no known operators, highlighting potential collision risks. Another entry notes radar and FLIR detection of objects in restricted warning areas with no response to IFFF interrogation. Ongoing observation was mandated throughout early 2015 as Roosevelt continued operating off the coast of Florida. The encounters persisted. The gimbal incident on January 21, 2015, stands out as the most thoroughly documented. A series of unidentified radar returns was promptly followed by visual confirmation of a distinctly structured rotating object captured via ADF FLIR. The pilots noted a swarm of smaller contacts presenting on radar, designating one for tracking purposes. The object maneuvered without visible propulsion, its infrared signature cooler than surrounding temperatures, indicating the absence of conventional exhaust or afterburner traces. At that time, the strike group commander mandated that all anomalous encounters be reported directly to the Carrier Air Wing Intelligence Office. The consequent Navy event summary, later referenced in the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program files, recounted that unidentified aerial vehicles demonstrated advanced flight capabilities. No known friendly or foreign aircraft shared the attributes observed. As the Roosevelt concluded its Comp-2X exercise and set sail for deployment in March 2015, the issue persisted. Air crews continued to relay sightings of unknown objects along the carrier's trajectory to the Persian Gulf. The Navy, with rising concerns regarding safety and intelligence implications, instituted internal protocols detailing how to formally log UAP encounters. Years later, in May 2019, the New York Times revealed the story to the public, affirming that numerous Roosevelt pilots had submitted official hazard reports and that the Navy had validated the authenticity of both the gimbal and Go Fast videos. The Pentagon conceded that the imagery had indeed been captured by Navy aircraft and remained classified as unidentified. Commander David Fravor, though not affiliated with Roosevelt's Air Wing, recognized the recurring pattern without hesitation. His own 2004 encounter with the USS Nimitz, characterized by a tic-tac object, shared the same flight dynamics. Instantaneous acceleration, absence of exhaust, and no wings or sound were commonalities. When queried about the Roosevelt incidents, Fravor stated that they were witnessing the same phenomenon we had observed, objects moving in manners that defy current aerodynamic principles. In 2019, the United States Navy formally amended its reporting guidelines for pilots to document UAP sightings, citing the Roosevelt encounters as a pivotal factor. Navy spokesperson Joseph Gradisher confirmed to media outlets that there had been numerous reports of unauthorized and unidentified aircraft infiltrating various military-controlled ranges, asserting that the Navy and the Air Force take these reports with utmost seriousness due to safety and security concerns. In April 2020, the Department of Defense formally announced the release of the 3 Navy videos, stating they did not reveal any capabilities or systems, yet the aerial phenomena observed remained classified as unidentified. The metadata confirmed the USS Roosevelt as the source of both GMB and GS. Even now, the Navy has not assigned these objects to any recognized source, whether foreign or domestic. The Office of Naval Intelligence and the Naval Air Systems Command retain the original radar data along with ATF flyer information, segments of which remain classified. In subsequent discussions, Lieutenant Graves remarked on the ongoing nature of these encounters. These were not isolated incidents. They were a constant presence, always in our training airspace. We had simply come to accept them. Yet, their behavior was unlike anything we operated. This was what troubled us the most. Radar systems, infrared detectors, and human sight consistently reported the same enigmatic phenomena over the Western Atlantic. Over the years spanning from 2014 to 2015, U.S. Navy aviators aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt compiled the most extensive series of military UAP encounters ever documented in recent history. The plethora of reports, recordings, and Freedom of Information Act releases that followed have transformed the way the Navy engages with unidentified objects in restricted airspace. The videos are publicly available now, transcripts have been verified, and radar logs are securely filed away. However, the entity captured in the footage, bright, rotating, and silent, remains just as it was that day over the Atlantic, unidentified. Turning to the events surrounding the USS Omaha, the summer of 2019 in San Diego commenced with calm waters. The expansive Pacific lay dark and uninterrupted beneath the low-lying horizon. The USS Omaha, designated LCS-12, was engaged in standard operations as part of a surface contingent performing exercises within the Navy's controlled zone near San Clemente Island, an area with a long history of missile tests, drone operations, and electronic warfare drills. Yet, on several nights throughout that summer, radar screens on board the Omaha and nearby destroyers began to illuminate with contacts that defied any recognizable profile. Initially, these objects were categorized as UAS, or unmanned aerial systems. Small and swift, they maneuvered with purpose. They would show up on radar intermittently, sometimes as individual units, sometimes as groups, lingering far longer than any conventional drone typically could. Between July 15th and July 17th, 2019, these occurrences escalated into one of the most meticulously documented multi-ship encounters in the annals of modern naval history. The account begins with the destroyer USS Kid, designated DEDG-100. Logs generated from her deck, released through the Freedom of Information Act, depict multiple contacts of unknown origin. At 10:03 p.m., the log details UAS maneuvering around the ship, lights visible but with no IFFF response. Over the next 2 hours, the log continues, noting multiple UAS detected, the ship adjusting course and speed alongside a helicopter dispatched for investigation. Crew members aboard USS Rafael Peralta, DDG-115, and USS John Finn, DDG-113, reported similar encounters, identifying bright objects moving at moderate speeds while holding their positions against the wind. These phenomena were not mere radar blips. Visual observers noted them with the naked eye. The pattern persisted in the following nights, with up to 6 unidentified objects operating concurrently at altitudes ranging from 700 to 1,000 feet, well within military-designated airspace. Then, the Omaha entered the fray. On July 15, 2019, her Combat Information Center crew began tracking a spherical object utilizing multiple sensors. The recorded data incorporated radar, electro-optical, and infrared returns. In the later leaked video, verified by the Department of Defense, the object demonstrated a glowing sphere hovering consistently before descending towards the ocean. In the audio captured, a voice within the Combat Information Center can be heard declaring splash, along with a bearing and range. This footage, time-stamped and geolocated to the Omaha's position west of San Diego, became a prominent marker in the narrative of the Navy's contemporary UAP encounters. Its authenticity was confirmed by Pentagon spokesperson Susan Goff in April of 2021, who affirmed that the referenced images and videos were indeed produced by U.S. Navy personnel. She stated that the subject matter is under review by the UAP task force, yet no further clarification was provided. Radar data collected from that night, according to following disclosures from the Navy, indicated as many as 14 separate contacts near the Omaha's perimeter. Some remained stationary, while others exhibited erratic movement, with none transmitting identification codes. Their radar signatures diverged significantly from those of conventional aircraft or recognized drones. The ship's Sea Giraffe radar intermittently recorded their presence, at times losing track only to reacquire them moments later. The Omaha was not operating in isolation. The destroyers USS Paul Hamilton, DDG-60, and USS Russell, DDG-59, conducting maneuvers in adjacent waters, documented the same phenomena. The Russell's crew captured night vision footage of several triangular-shaped objects maneuvering above the ship, another piece of imagery that the Pentagon later confirmed as veritable Navy footage taken in 2019. Collectively, these encounters coalesced into what sailors dubbed the swarm, multiple unidentified aerial vehicles functioning over extended periods above Navy ships in restricted zones, all without attribution. Initially, the Navy presumed these were unidentified drones, perhaps commercial, potentially foreign, or even test apparatus that had encroached on their territory. However, the observed behavior did not align with such assumptions. These objects maintained altitude for durations exceeding the typical battery life of standard drones, withstanding high winds aloft without drift and moving beyond visual confirmation at velocities that defied their apparent dimensions. In the ensuing months, Naval Intelligence, the Coast Guard Investigative Service, and the FBI initiated parallel investigations. They engaged with bridge crews, scrutinized radar recordings, and coordinated with local maritime authorities in efforts to identify any civilian vessels in the vicinity capable of launching drones. Yet, no source could be identified. Shipping data, including automatic identification system records and radar feeds from nearby coastal installations, revealed no vessels aligned with the illuminated activity within range. Within the Navy, this incident was logged under the UAP Task Force Review, which would later transform into the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as AARO. The footage captured by the USS Omaha was classified as secret and shared via restricted channels before its eventual release through the Black Vault and mainstream media outlets. Analysts examining the footage noted the absence of visible propulsion systems, the consistent infrared signature, and the object's apparent dive into the ocean, a phenomenon that some observers suggested might indicate transmedium behavior. However, the Pentagon refrained from using that term. In public remarks, officials stressed that a splash is merely a routine call sign indicating a loss of visual contact, rather than a confirmation of an object's entry into the water. Following the sighting, no sonar, radar, or tangible debris fields were identified. The ocean remained a vast emptiness. Meanwhile, the deck logs from the destroyers emerged as the most compelling evidence. The timeline recorded by the USS Paul Hamilton for July 17, 2019, detailed continuous tracking of unmanned aerial systems from 21:37 to 23:47 hours, accompanied by course shifts and target illuminations from onboard sensors. The logs documented at least 3 distinct nights featuring similar encounters. Each vessel recorded consistent coordinates and operating conditions: light winds, serene seas, a clear sky, and no surface vessels present. When the story began to circulate in 2020, reporters cross-referenced the ship's GPS data with the Federal Aviation Administration's flight records and coastal radar logs. No matching aircraft appeared. When asked if any of its systems could account for the sightings, the Navy responded via spokesperson Commander Zachary Harrell. The Navy remains engaged in investigating incursions into military ranges and designated airspaces, which encompass training zones off the Southern California coast. By early 2021, the Pentagon began briefing Congress members on the events surrounding the Omaha as part of a broader trend. The Office of Naval Intelligence incorporated these incidents into a classified annex of the UAP Task Force report that it submitted to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The public iteration of that report, which was published on June 25, 2021, recognized that a total of 144 incidents occurring between 2004 and 2021 had undergone analysis, most involving personnel in the United States military, with several remaining unexplained due to insufficient data. The Omaha incident found itself categorically included in that group. It had not been dismissed as an optical illusion, radar interference, or misidentified aircraft. Rather, it was regarded as a data set meriting further investigation, corroborated by multiple sensors, validated as genuine by the chain of command, yet lacking enough information for identification. Sailors who stood watch that night recounted the bewilderment in the Combat Information Center. The object's movement was observed as smooth, deliberate, and almost effortless. It did not exhibit the erratic tumbling or wobbling characteristic of drones. It moved steadily, one crew member later remarked. One could sense it was under control. The Navy's surface warfare community took enough notice of the incident to adjust their procedures. By the close of 2021, all major combatant commands had formalized reporting protocols regarding UAS/UAP incursions near U.S. naval assets. Vessels now record such occurrences in standardized formats that funnel directly into intelligence channels, rather than remaining buried within deck logs. In 2022, the newly established ARROW confirmed that the events off San Diego in 2019, including the phenomenon encountered by the USS Omaha, were cataloged as part of its historical case archive. Director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick later testified that several incidents from 2019 were confirmed to involve multiple sensor data, and analysts had not uncovered any indications of foreign adversary involvement. As investigations progressed, independent experts evaluating the data proposed tentative theories ranging from advanced commercial drones launched from small boats to classified U.S. experimental platforms or foreign surveillance devices. None of these hypotheses accurately fit the details. The endurance, coordination, and sensor profiles of the incidents remained at odds with known systems. To this day, the 2019 drone swarm stands as a defining case in the evolving acknowledgement of unidentified aerial incursions by the U.S. military. It compelled the Navy to regard such encounters as genuine operational challenges rather than fringe phenomena. This case acted as a bridge, linking the Tic-Tac events of 2004 with the Roosevelt engagements a decade later, illustrating that these incidents were neither isolated nor confined by maritime limits or command structures. The Navy verified the authenticity of the footage. Congress mandated the disclosure of data. Analysts continue wrestling with the physics of the situation beyond San Clemente Island. The radar tracks faded into the Pacific darkness as the ocean absorbed its mysteries, as it has forever done. And aboard the Omaha, the logbook entry persists, chronicling the time, bearing, and range, an enduring testament to a moment when sailors gazing over the placid water observed something moving with a purpose that transcended all familiar. Categorizations. Perhaps your eyelids are growing heavy, yet if you remain attentive, stay with us a while longer. A series of quiet, captivating stories now follow. Each is a concealed encounter that lingers in memory. Chile's pivotal encounter, 1948. In the early hours of July 24, 1948, the tranquility of the night sky over the American South was disrupted by an encounter that would challenge even the most seasoned commercial aviators. It was just before 3 o'clock in the morning when Eastern Airlines Flight 576, a Douglas DC-3 passenger aircraft en route from Houston to Atlanta, sliced through the darkness at 5,000 feet. In command was Captain Clarence S. Chile, a distinguished World War II bomber pilot boasting thousands of flight hours. Seated beside him was co-pilot John B. Whitted, also a veteran of war and as experienced in aviation as his captain. Behind them, 20 passengers rested peacefully, oblivious to the fact that their flight would be etched into history as one of the most renowned UFO cases documented in the Air Force's Project Blue Book files. The night was crystal clear, the air was calm, and visibility was pristine. At approximately 2:45 in the morning, as the DC-3 neared Montgomery, Alabama, Chile's initial observation was of a fierce light emerging from the right side of the aircraft, hovering slightly above their altitude. At first glance, he speculated it might be another aircraft, a military jet perhaps, on a collision course. However, as the luminescence advanced, he quickly discerned that it was something altogether unrecognizable. He nudged Whitted, motioning toward the strange radiance in the night sky. Both pilots gazed in astonishment as the light expanded, exposing an unmistakable structure, a massive cigar-shaped vessel approaching them at an alarming speed. In his later sworn testimony, Chile recounted that the craft measured no less than 100 feet in length and possessed a girth twice that of a B-29 bomber's fuselage. It appeared crafted from metal, gleaming as it reflected light emitted by its own brilliant luminescence, devoid of any wings or visible tail fins. Along its side, the pilots claimed they could make out a series of rectangular windows aglow with a gentle bluish-white light. Chile thought he could detect silhouettes within those windows, dark shapes moving in anticipation. Whitted, ever the pragmatist, later expressed his uncertainty about observing figures, but concurred regarding the illuminated ports. At the craft's rear, they both noted an intense orange-red plume or flame, extending several times the craft's own length, pulsating like the propulsion of a rocket engine. The object hurtled toward them at a staggering velocity. In a heartbeat, the pilots braced for a possible collision. Yet, at the last millisecond, the craft executed a sharp climb, veering slightly to the right. The DC-3 quaked in its turbulence, jostled by the tumult of the craft's passage. The object raced past their right wing, ascending into the inky darkness and vanishing into a fragmented layer of clouds with an explosive surge of acceleration. The entire encounter, though brief, lasted perhaps no more than 10 to 15 seconds. Still, both men were convinced they had witnessed a solid, structured craft the likes of which humanity had never known. A passenger seated near a window corroborated that they too had observed a brilliant streak of light outside. The majority of others were simply asleep, spared from the startling event. For Chile and Whitted, the experience was hauntingly vivid and far too precise to dismiss as mere fantasy. Once on the ground, they promptly submitted a detailed report to Air Force authorities. Their narrative was swiftly forwarded to Project S, the Air Force initiative founded in 1947 to scrutinize reports of flying saucers. Investigators were captivated by the credibility of the pilots. These were not excitable amateurs or mere civilians misinterpreting the night sky. They were two of the most qualified witnesses one could hope for, trained professionals whose careers hinged on pinpoint accuracy and observation. The Air Force deemed the sighting of Chile and Whitted so important that it became a foundational case in compiling what would eventually be termed the famous estimate of the situation. This classified report, prepared by Project Sign personnel in late 1948, concluded that UFOs represented tangible physical crafts, likely of interplanetary origin. Although the estimate was later dismissed by Air Force Chief of Staff Hoy Vandenberg and ordered to be destroyed, its very existence serves as testimony to how seriously incidents like that of Chile and Whitted were regarded by the upper echelons of military intelligence. However, not everyone accepted the pilot's account at face value. Some astronomers proposed that the men had spotted a bolide, a type of exceedingly bright meteor that can appear elongated, emit sparks, and leave behind a glowing trail. Yet meteors do not have illuminated windows, nor do they veer up sharply to avert collisions at the last possible instant. Other skeptics suggested it might have been a classified military jet prototype, but in 1948, no aircraft existed that could match the size, speed, or luminous characteristics as described by the pilots. Additionally, records confirmed no aircraft were operating in that particular air corridor at that hour. Chile, for his part, never faltered in his belief. In subsequent interviews, he insisted that it was a man-made object, or if not crafted by human hands, then certainly the creation of some other beings. He described the illuminated windows as vividly distinct, compelling enough that he could not dismiss them as illusions. Whitted, while expressing some uncertainty regarding figures seen through the windows, shared the same firm conviction that the craft was real, metallic, and operated under intelligent control. For both aviators, the encounter marked the apex of their flying careers. Ultimately, Project S classified the Chile and Whitted case as unidentified, ranking it as one of the most robust entries in their files. Later, under the aegis of Project Blue Book, the official narrative was discreetly redirected towards a meteor explanation, aligning with the Air Force's increasing inclination to downplay UFO sightings. Nevertheless, within the confines of analytical circles, it was understood that the sighting could not be easily explained away. The case endured, and in the words of Blue Book's later director, Edward Ruppelt, it remained one of the classic UFO reports of all time. The encounter of Chile and Whitted also created ripples beyond the military sphere. In civilian UFO research, it emerged as one of the initial credible pilot sightings of a structured craft at close proximity, repeatedly referenced in books and articles over subsequent decades as a benchmark case, direct, detailed, and substantiated by two expert witnesses. The distinctive detail of the illuminated windows became a key element in later narratives of abduction and contact, where occupants or beings were often described as being visible inside crafts. Although Chile and Whitted made no assertions regarding extraterrestrial life, their sighting lent credence to the escalating belief that UFOs were decidedly not mere lights or illusions, but constituted solid machines. Decades later, their encounter continues to stand as one of the most compelling cases in the Blue Book archive. What Chile and Whitted witnessed that July night over Alabama resists simplistic explanations even to this day. Could it have been a meteor misinterpreted by two seasoned aviators? A secret experimental aircraft flying perilously close to a commercial airliner? Or was it something altogether outside the realm of 1948 technology? The Air Force never delivered a resolution that fully satisfied either the witnesses, the public, or the annals of history. For Chile and Whitted, the incident became an indelible imprint on their memories. The blinding approach of a colossal, radiant craft with a series of illuminated windows, the searing blast of exhaust, and its sudden ascent into the clouds composed a vivid tableau. For Project Blue Book, this episode emerged as a fundamental enigma, illustrating that the phenomenon transcended mere rural fascination and reached even the elite ranks of America's most adept pilots. The encounter experienced by Chile and Whitted remains one of the most compelling cases within the annals of UFO sightings. It involved a near collision between a passenger aircraft and a luminescent object adorned with windows, a scenario that the official narratives have never eradicated convincingly from public consciousness. Fast forward to the Japan Airlines radar mystery, which unfolded on November 17, 1986, over the vast expanse of eastern Alaskan airspace. The sky remained clear at cruising altitude, devoid of anything on the radar except the sheer openness of the atmosphere. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a Boeing 747 cargo freighter, had been in the air for several hours, journeying from Paris to Tokyo with a planned stop in Anchorage. On board were 3 crew members: Captain Kenju Taruchi, an experienced aviator and former fighter pilot boasting over 10,000 hours in the air, First Officer Takanori Tamafuji, and Flight Engineer Yoshio Tsukuba. After crossing into United States airspace above Alaska without any issues, they maintained an altitude of 35,000 feet. Then, at 5:11 in the evening local time, as the aircraft neared the eastern edge of the Alaskan interior, an object materialized on their radar scope, exhibiting erratic movements. In mere moments, the crew corroborated their radar reading visually. 2 small, round, glowing vehicles danced in close formation, their lights failing to blink like typical aircraft indicators, and their movements defied the norms of both commercial and military aviation. The lights aligned themselves off the aircraft's port side, expertly pacing alongside the Boeing 747. In astonishment, the crew observed as the objects executed abrupt vertical ascents and rapid decelerations, maneuvers entirely unattainable by any known aircraft of that era. Subsequently, these craft positioned themselves directly ahead of the Boeing, seemingly escorting it. Captain Taruchi later articulated the experience through formal statements and interviews. The smaller vessels were depicted as rectangular, emitting a burst of luminosity that flooded the cockpit, so intense that it momentarily compromised the visibility of the flight instruments. Taruchi felt the heat radiating from the objects through the glass. Likening their appearance to spaceships straight out of science fiction, their movements were a testament to capabilities impossible for conventional aircraft. The situation took a dramatic turn. Approximately 10 minutes post the original detection, a vast, dark form emerged behind the aircraft. Taruchi sized it up as equivalent to the dimensions of 2 aircraft carriers and noted its walnut-like oblong shape with panels or structures lining its surface. This massive entity loomed closely behind the Boeing, maintaining a consistent proximity that sent shivers down the spines of the crew. Despite the nocturnal hour, the moonlight provided enough illumination for the crew to discern the object's outline distinctly. The flight engineer and first officer confirmed its visual presence as well. At 5:19 p.m., Captain Taruchi communicated with the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, at the Air Route Traffic Control Center situated in Anchorage, relaying details of the sighting. Initially, the controllers could detect nothing atypical on their radar. However, in mere minutes, they identified a primary return, a non-transponder radar echo located near Flight 1628's trajectory. The FAA sprang into action to verify the claims. Radar installations at nearby Elmendorf Air Force Base and surrounding areas began to pick up intermittent signals, aligning with the unknown object shadowing the Japanese flight. Air traffic controllers inquired whether the crew wished to alter their altitude or take evasive maneuvers. Taruchi consented, initiating a descent and several course adjustments in an attempt to shake off the mysterious craft, but it stubbornly persisted. Controllers dispatched a United Airlines flight and a United States Air Force C-130 cargo plane to the region for visual validation. The C-130 reported a lack of visual sightings, yet by then, the objects had inexplicably vanished from both the sky and radar. Though rattled, the Japanese crew maintained their composure, continuing their journey safely to Anchorage. Their landing occurred without incident, but the narrative had only just begun to unfold. In the wake of the incident, post-flight investigations were prompt and thorough. Captain Taruchi submitted meticulous written accounts, complete with diagrams illustrating the configuration and movement of the craft. His fellow crew members corroborated the main elements of the sighting. The FAA conducted a comprehensive inquiry that included analyzing radar data, examining cockpit voice recordings, and interviewing air traffic controllers and military personnel. The collected data unequivocally indicated that a primary radar return had indeed been logged in proximity to Flight 1628 during the span of the encounter. Unlike standard radar returns associated with commercial aircraft having transponders, this anomalous echo lacked identification altogether and did not conform to established air traffic. The radar signals substantiated the crew's assertions, which claimed that an unidentified craft had been pursuing them for over 30 minutes across several hundred miles of national airspace. John Callahan, then serving as the FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations, became directly engaged in the inquiry. He publicly recounted that a meeting convened shortly after the incident involving representatives from the FAA, CIA, FBI, and the Department of Defense. During this gathering, radar data, audio tapes, and crew testimonies were examined in a classified context. According to Callahan, CIA emissaries instructed all present not to disclose information regarding the incident, asserting that it had never occurred. The gathered data and tapes were subsequently archived, and much of the case was shrouded in obscurity for many years. Nonetheless, Callahan retained copies of the original data, including radar recordings and voice transcripts. He later disseminated them in the 2000s, validating not only the initial event, but also the subsequent federal reactions. In spite of the compelling evidence, Captain Tarucci endured significant backlash. Japan Airlines suspended him shortly after the occurrence, attributing the decision to the overwhelming public scrutiny surrounding the case. He found himself reassigned to a desk position, despite having an impeccable safety record and considerable experience in the cockpit. The officially stated reason bore no connection to the incident, yet speculation abounded that his credibility had been compromised, not due to any fault of his own, but because he had been bold enough to describe an experience devoid of any official explanation. Media outlets seized upon the sighting, transforming it into a sensation that captured attention both nationally and internationally. Newspapers from the United States and Japan chronicled the incident, while significant television networks aired segments showcasing Tarucci's translated remarks and the associated radar footage. The narrative took on renewed significance in 1987 when the FAA acknowledged the authenticity of the radar data and voice recordings. A spokesperson confirmed that something had indeed been identified on radar in proximity to Flight 1628, yet stressed that no conclusive identification could be made regarding its source. UFO researchers lauded the Japan Airlines radar case as one of the best documented incidents in history. It intertwined expert pilot testimonies with real-time FAA communications, radar data from both civilian and military channels, and the tangible reactions of the aircraft's crew. Few UFO incidents feature such a confluence of observational and instrumental data, particularly within controlled airspace monitored by multiple agencies. Detractors put forward various theories. Some proposed that Tarucci had misidentified the planet Jupiter, or that reflections on the cockpit glass had misled him. Others posited natural phenomena, citing ice crystals or light reflections from distant ground sources. However, these theories failed to account for the corroborating radar evidence, the consistent visual tracking by all three crew members, and the detailed descriptions of the close encounters with a structured, maneuvering craft, especially the substantial mothership seen trailing the aircraft. Even among military and aviation professionals, the case continued to linger in unresolved territory. Former FAA official John Callahan publicly denounced the government's choice to withhold details, arguing that the air safety implications alone justified a call for transparency. In ensuing years, Captain Tarucci upheld his account with conviction. In rare interviews, he reiterated that he had witnessed a tangible, intelligently controlled object that reacted to his aircraft's movements, maintained formation, and emitted intense light and heat. He articulated that, as a military-trained aviator and commercial pilot, he had been educated to recognize aircraft silhouettes and behaviors. What he encountered diverged from anything he had ever witnessed. The Japan Airlines radar case stands apart within the annals of global UFO encounters, not due to vagueness, but because of its stark precision. Unlike other incidents that rely solely on eyewitness accounts, this event was documented, recorded, and investigated through multiple agencies, only to be quietly relegated to obscurity. To this day, the raw radar footage remains elusive, and a significant portion of the government's internal communications concerning the event remains classified. Nonetheless, what is accessible is compelling in its implications. A team of trained aviators observed something immense in maneuvering, visible on military radar, detailed in real time, that tracked them for nearly 400 meters before vanishing. The legacy of Flight 1628 persists, not within any official database, but in aviation logs, radar archives, and the recollections of a pilot who gazed into the night sky above Alaska and encountered something he was never meant to see and something that defies explanation. The Marfa lights resurfaced in 2003, Marfa, Texas, USA. It commenced like any ordinary day in the parched expanse of West Texas. A survey crew from Texas State University, a blend of graduate geologists and contracted civil engineers, had positioned their instruments just east of Highway 90, not far from the renowned Marfa viewing platform. Unbeknownst to them that morning, by the time darkness enveloped the landscape, their devices would fail, their assumptions would unravel, and they would emerge as witnesses to phenomena beyond explanation. The team was assigned to assess magnetic anomalies near a proposed highway expansion. Although their task appeared routine, this particular stretch of desert had already developed a reputation, one that far predated the arrival of any scientific expedition. For over a century, locals had recounted tales of mysterious lights that floated, flashed, and darted across the plains with no discernible origin. However, on that specific October evening, folklore transformed into empirical data. Under the guidance of Dr. Kenneth Hall, a geophysics professor, and assisted by Luis Aranda, a civil engineering technician, the crew deployed an array of flux gate magnetometers, seismic accelerometers, and 2 GPS-tracked spectrometers along a 500-meter transect. The intent was to document subsurface mineral variations and minor tectonic stress signatures. As dusk descended at 6:45 p.m., with the sun sinking quickly behind the Davis Mountains, the instruments began to yield erratic readings. Aranda was the first to take note. He recalled observing the magnetometer spike dramatically beyond normal ranges, indicating an anomaly, without any apparent equipment malfunction or nearby vehicles, only a sudden deviation, suggesting something magnetic had passed near the probe. Initially, the team speculated that a solar event could be at fault, yet no geomagnetic storm had been documented that week. Then, precisely at 7:06 p.m., as the last vestiges of sunset faded, 3 spherical lights emerged on the horizon, approximately 1.5 kilometers away. They hovered motionless for several seconds before shifting into a perfectly triangular formation. Dr. Hall initially theorized they were vehicle headlights until one of the lights ascended abruptly at a 90-degree angle, hovered in mid-air, and then returned to its original position. Another light split into 2 distinct points, rotated and re-merged seamlessly, all without emitting any sound. The lights pulsed in alternating colors, white, orange, then a brief flash of green. The crew set about capturing the phenomenon with a Sony Handycam secured on a stabilized tripod, the amateur video technology intended to immortalize the extraordinary event. Aranda, eager to document everything, also attempted to film the spectrometer's readings with his smartphone. However, just 2 minutes into their vigil, the camera's GPS module unexpectedly stalled, causing the timestamp to cease its updates even as the footage continued rolling. With further investigation, it was revealed that the file recorded for almost 12 minutes but lacked reliable geolocation data. Simultaneously, nearby instruments began to display erratic behavior. The seismic sensors detected minute vibrations that could not be traced back to any conventional source. Furthermore, the magnetometers indicated shifts in polarity, an occurrence nearly impossible without the influence of a potent and dynamic magnetic field. It felt as though the Earth itself was responding. Hall remarked that these instruments were not merely malfunctioning, they were being inundated with forces beyond their limits. Around 7:15 in the evening, the lights initiated a slow movement. They arranged themselves into a flawless linear sequence stretching along the crew's transect. Each light hovered precisely over a sensor that had been deployed, maintaining their position for nearly 5 minutes while pulsing rhythmically, as if observing or interacting with the apparatus at their disposal. Then, without any prior warning, the lights extinguished in perfect synchrony. The team stood in stunned silence for nearly a full minute, the desert surrounding them stripped of sound. When they finally regained their senses, they hurried to examine the sensors. Astonishingly, some were still warm despite the coolness of the night air. One magnetometer had ceased logging all data, while a backup memory card allocated to a seismic probe had been entirely wiped, rendering it unreadable upon subsequent examination in the lab. By the time the crew packed their equipment and returned to their field office in Alpine, the footage was already being secured for backup, and logs were being meticulously cross-verified. The raw footage revealed flickering lights, one of which emitted a halo-like glow that was imperceptible to the naked eye. Even more notable were the peculiar anomalies observed in the spectrometer readings, indicating visible surges of electromagnetic radiation that peaked just moments prior to each light's movement. This data was compiled and dispatched to the Geoscience Department at Texas State University. In a matter of weeks, requests for access to the files came from researchers at the University of Texas at El Paso. News of the incident swiftly navigated through academic circles. Some began to characterize the event as a significant leap forward in comprehending localized plasma phenomena, commonly referred to as Earthlights. In early 2004, a small cohort of graduate students, led by Professor Dana Whitaker from UTEP, returned to the site aiming to replicate the circumstances. They installed an array of pressure sensors, barometers, and high-frequency electromagnetic field recorders. Over the course of 3 consecutive nights, they monitored the background electromagnetic levels, yet no visible light phenomena were recorded. However, on the 4th night, shortly after 2 in the morning, 3 members of the team witnessed a bluish orb descending from a ridgeline west of the original incident site. The object hovered for a brief moment before silently ascending, disappearing into the clouds above. Further analyses were conducted. Soil samples taken from the original site exhibited higher concentrations of ionized silicates than what was typical, along with trace amounts of scandium, an element that had not been previously documented within the surface compositions of the region. Additionally, local flora showed signs of chlorophyll suppression, which Whitaker's group hypothesized could stem from extended exposure to ultraviolet radiation. However, not all narratives arose from the scientific community. A retired park ranger, Daryl McCombs, stepped forward after discovering a report in the Alpine Avalanche about the survey team's encounters. He recounted a similar episode in 1983 when lights of comparable nature manifested during a controlled burn in the same vicinity. His written account from that time had been dismissed as a misidentification of gas flares. He firmly asserted that he recognized flares when he saw them, emphasizing that what he witnessed was altogether different. Those lights moved with intent. Additionally, Rosa Mendez, an amateur astronomer who had been observing the night sky from her backyard in Fort Davis, submitted her own observations. Her log documented 3 unidentified lights moving in a triangular formation over the Marfa Plains at precisely the time of the incident. Her entries highlighted that there was no sound and no blinking and concluded they were too slow for any known aircraft. Dr. Hall and Aranda were later invited to share their findings at the 2005 Santa Fe Symposium on Anomalous Geophysical Phenomena. Their session attracted a crowd comprising both open-minded physicists and skeptical meteorologists alike. While a definitive consensus eluded them, the level of interest was unmistakable. One theory proposed during the symposium suggested that Tectonic stress in regions where underground fault lines are known to shift could create piezoelectric discharges through quartz-rich rock formations, manifesting as visible plasma orbs. Nevertheless, no one could fully account for the precise movements or the synchronized interactions with the electronic devices. NASA physicist Dr. Angeline Nair, who was present at the symposium, confided to Hall afterward that the scenario reminded her of occurrences logged at remote Arctic observations. Interference lacking an apparent source, lights appearing without engines, alluding to the possibility that something unexplainable lingers just beyond our grasp. Subsequently, the Marfa City Council allocated a modest grant to promote academic exploration of the area. The Marfa Lights Viewing Center, once merely a curiosity for tourists, began featuring an informational kiosk that referenced the unexplained scientific readings from October 2003. By 2007, a peer-reviewed study was published in the Journal of Geophysical Inquiry, co-authored by Hall, Whitaker, and 3 additional colleagues. This paper reviewed the incident and proposed an unclassified geophysical plasma phenomenon as the most plausible working hypothesis. The concluding statement of the paper firmly declared that the Marfa lights were neither a product of hallucination nor a fabricated trick. They may not be of extraterrestrial origin, yet they are authentically real, measurable, and interactive. Even now, over 20 years later, the 2003 event persists as the most rigorously scrutinized encounter with the Marfa lights on record. The video footage, stripped of GPS information but otherwise preserved, has found a permanent home within Texas State's Earth Sciences Archive. When asked in a 2020 interview if he had ever come to terms with what he witnessed, Luis Aranda merely shook his head. "I've handled oil field sensors, seismic equipment, and high-speed cameras," he explained. "I can spot faulty data when I see it. Yet, the recordings from that night, every anomaly, aligned precisely with our visual observations. I dismiss any skepticism. Something intelligent was certainly present. Whether it originated from the Earth below or somewhere more distant, I cannot ascertain." Dr. Paul, now enjoying semi-retirement, occasionally presents at local conferences and contributes to publications regarding geomagnetic phenomena. While he refrains from engaging in speculation, he maintains a steadfast belief in one reality: the universe is still full of surprises. We just happened to stumble upon one in the desert. The Marfa lights have blazed across the Texas landscape for generations, yet in the year 2003, a team of trained scientists transcended mere observation. They meticulously recorded and measured the lights, leaving behind a comprehensive trail of data that remains unchallenged by skeptics. Whether the phenomenon stems from unidentified geophysical processes or hints at a more insightful intelligence, the lights continue to elude full comprehension, existing perpetually just out of reach. Gray Barker's collected reports from the 1950s through the 1960s in Clarksburg, West Virginia, USA, follow the events surrounding Albert K. Bender's abrupt closure of the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1953. This news rippled through the tightly knit UFO community, eliciting a quiet shock. Among those paying close attention was a young writer from West Virginia named Gray Barker. During the day, he worked for a film distribution company, but at night, often well into the early hours, he diligently chronicled what he and many others perceived as America's most confounding enigma: the flying saucer phenomenon. Although Barker had never met Bender in person, their exchanges via the Bureau had established a connection, sharing clippings and letters detailing accounts of sightings from their respective locales. With Bender's sudden silence, Barker's curiosity intensified. A blend of journalist and puzzle solver, he began compiling notes, letters, and interviews, which would eventually form the foundation of his collected reports. His first lead was a letter from one of Bender's previous contacts, implying that an in-person persuasion had led to Bender's decision to cease operations. Barker arranged to visit Bridgeport in the autumn of 1953. The sharp, salty air from Long Island Sound greeted him as he disembarked the train. Bender consented to meet, but only in the neutral territory of a hotel lobby. Arriving early, Barker took in the dim light spilling from tall lamps, casting yellow circles across the waiting room's carpet. When Bender entered, he appeared noticeably thinner than in his photographs, shadows accentuating the hollows beneath his eyes. Their conversation lasted less than 30 minutes. Bender refrained from revealing names, yet there was no need. Phrases like "higher source" and "it's best to leave it alone" hinted at secrets far weightier than ordinary discretion. Barker sensed Bender was holding back sentiments he longed to express. After their handshake and parting, Barker proceeded toward the elevator for his room. Suddenly, he became aware of another presence in the hallway. A figure loomed ahead, stationary enough for his features to blend into the shadows. Initially thinking the man might simply be another guest, Barker was startled when the man stepped into the soft glow of a wall sconce. Clad in a black suit, white shirt, narrow tie, and hat in hand, the man remained silent for a moment, scrutinizing Barker before gliding past him as if appraising the space that separated them. The hallway felt eerily quiet, devoid of any sounds, no muffled voices from nearby rooms, no commotion from the lobby below, and even the hum of the light fixtures seemed to diminish. Barker offered a polite nod and attempted to slip by. The man, however, did not yield. When Barker slowed, the man finally expressed in a tone that was flat and lacking any discernible accent that he would not find what he was seeking. This statement felt less like a question or a threat and more like a foregone conclusion. Before Barker could formulate a reply, the man turned into another corridor and disappeared. Following a moment later, Barker found the hallway vacant. No sound of a door closing, no footsteps reverberating. Back in his room, he discovered the envelope containing his meeting notes had its flap unsealed, although he was confident that he had sealed it downstairs prior to his ascent. In the ensuing years, Barker continued to gather not only UFO reports, but also narratives of silent visitors. Most accounts arrived as second-hand letters, detailing encounters with men who arrived in sleek black vehicles, posed probing questions, or instructed witnesses to forget what they had seen. Barker began to recognize a common tone underlying these accounts, an unsettling sense that someone had been orchestrating the conversation all along. By the late 1950s, Barker had garnered a reputation in the UFO community as an individual who did more than merely collect stories. He discerned patterns within the reports. Thus, when a particularly detailed account arrived on his desk in 1961, he resolved to investigate it personally. The letter originated from Paul Henderson, a part-time radio technician residing near Parkersburg, West Virginia. Henderson recounted that after he reported a low-level disc sighting to a local newspaper, two men in dark suits confronted him at home. They possessed not only knowledge of his report, but also the precise time he had stepped outside, the direction he had faced, and that he had captured a Polaroid photograph. The following day, Barker called Henderson. Henderson's voice trembled with apprehension, yet he agreed to a meeting on the condition that Barker would come alone. The route to Henderson's residence meandered through rolling hills, with the bare winter trees rattling in the wind. Upon his arrival, Barker noted the yard was empty save for an aging sedan. Inside, Henderson fidgeted with the strap of his wristwatch as he recounted the unsettling visit. He described a knock at the door occurring shortly after sunset, followed by the two men entering uninvited. They revealed no names, but one briefly displayed a card bearing illegible lettering before tucking it away. Notably, they did not request the photograph. Instead, Henderson recalled they informed him that it would not be worth keeping, claiming it would fade, as if it held little significance. Barker expressed a desire to examine the photograph. Henderson retrieved an envelope from a drawer, carefully sliding the image across the table. The photograph appeared indistinct, almost bleached, as if drained of its exposure rather than simply aged. A subtle circular outline lingered above the tree line, the rest of the picture nearly white. As Barker scrutinized it, he became acutely aware of the unnatural hush enveloping the room. The ticking of the wall clock punctuated the silence, a solitary sound in the atmosphere. He shifted his gaze toward the window, noticing a black sedan idling at the distant edge of the drive. Two figures occupied the interior, their expressions obscured as they faced towards the house. Barker redirected his attention to Henderson, who had paled significantly. "That's them," he murmured. Without further deliberation, Barker collected his notes, expressed his gratitude to Henderson, and departed. Upon stepping outside, he noticed the car had vanished, leaving only the wind rustling through the trees. The following morning, he discovered the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, the one housing Henderson's original letter, was unlocked. Never had he left it that way. This singular detail confirmed the established pattern. A sighting gets reported, followed by a visit. Witnesses recede into the background. Sometimes evidence conveniently disappears. At other times, it is rendered devoid of value. Always, however, the visitors depart without providing their names or any credentials, accompanied only by a parting remark that bears more weight than the most overt threats. For Barker, these two encounters, one in a hotel corridor, the other on a remote road in West Virginia, suggested that Bender's experience was far from unique. The same thick atmosphere pervaded, the same soundlessness compressing the air, the same ashen faces and monotonous voices repeated endlessly. They exhibited a troubling familiarity with flying saucers, and Barker found himself weaving Bender's narrative alongside others to form what would eventually be dubbed the initial public outline of the Men in Black. Detractors accused him of exaggerating. Supporters contended he had discerned the edges of a systematic effort to keep the UFO enigma unresolved. By the late 1960s, Barker realized he had surpassed the role of mere observer. He had traversed the hallway. He had witnessed the car. Like the others, he comprehended the unspoken agreement. Sightings are merely one facet of the enigma. What follows are the visits, arriving without forewarning and never needing to justify their presence. In those moments, it became clear that your story was no longer solely yours. On August 25, 1951, an incident transpired that would become one of the most renowned UFO cases in American history in Lubbock, Texas, a tranquil college town situated on the flat prairie of the South Plains. Three professors from Texas Technological College, Dr. W. P. Agberg, Dr. W. L. Ducker, and Dr. H. W. Robinson, were seated outdoors, savoring the late summer evening when an extraordinary spectacle traversed the sky. Above them, in utter silence, a formation of bluish-white lights glided across the horizon in a flawless V shape. The professors were immediately captivated by the sight. The lights radiated intensely, surpassing the brightness of stars, and moved with a speed that left them astounded. They estimated the number of objects to be between 15 and 30. Quick assessments ruled out meteors. These did not blaze or flare, but instead sailed together in a highly coordinated manner. Being trained scientists, the men were judicious with their language, yet they reached a consensus that they had encountered something concrete, ordered, and unexplained. Word of the sighting rapidly circulated, and in mere hours, additional residents of Lubbock began to report analogous occurrences. Families relaxing on porches, students scattered across campus, and drivers on highways all recounted arcs and crescents of brilliant lights soaring above them. While some likened the displays to a flock of geese, that comparison dissolved at the onset. The objects moved too swiftly, too precisely, and their brilliance felt otherworldly. Over the successive nights, the phenomenon persisted. Time and again, townspeople turned their gaze skyward to witness clusters of lights gliding silently overhead. Whole neighborhoods congregated outside, pointing skyward in a mix of astonishment and trepidation. Children harbored fears, neighbors murmured speculations, and drivers halted along roadways. A collective sentiment of awe tinged with anxiety united the city. Each night, the formations returned with eerie constancy. The professors, eager to delve deeper into the mystery, brought along binoculars for their subsequent observations. Through the lenses, they reaffirmed their initial impressions. The lights were neither reflections nor birds. Their glow remained unwavering. They traveled at astonishing speeds, and they formed clearly defined groups. Their accounts were particularly weighty, not just due to their credible status as witnesses, but also because they insisted on dismissing conventional explanations. On August 30th, 1951, the case took an unexpected twist. On that night, 18-year-old Carl Hart Jr. found himself in his backyard when the lights materialized once more. Acting swiftly, he seized his Kodak camera and successfully captured 5 consecutive photographs. Upon development, the images showcased rows of luminous disks arranged in a clear V formation. Hart sold the photographs to the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, and hardly later did they grace newspapers nationwide, eventually being featured in Life magazine, propelling the local sightings into a national frenzy. The pictures introduced a newfound layer of credibility to the case. For the first time, there existed tangible evidence alongside the testimonies of numerous observers. The images underwent thorough analysis. Skeptics leveled accusations of deception, yet the negatives bore no signs of tampering. The exposures represented genuine records of something radiant in the sky. To believers, the photographs validated that the Lubbock lights were, in fact, real, and that the mystery could not be relegated to mere imagination. The United States Air Force promptly initiated an investigation under Project Blue Book, its formal UFO study initiative. Officers conducted interviews with Hart, the professors, and additional residents. Their official conclusion asserted that the lights were, in fact, reflections from clover or birds indigenous to the region, reflecting the illumination of the city's recently installed mercury vapor streetlights. The conclusion was tidy, yet it left many unsatisfied. The professors were particularly vocal in their dissent. They had scrutinized the lights through binoculars and noted the absence of wings fluttering or erratic motion. It was inconceivable that birds could achieve such speed or maintain such flawless alignment across the heavens. Hart, too, dismissed the explanation, staunchly defending his photographs for the entirety of his life. Independent analysts echoed this sentiment, asserting that the PLE theory could not adequately explain the observable phenomena or the captured images. Even within the Air Force, some officials confided that the situation remained a source of bewilderment. The lights from Locke captured the public's imagination, influenced by the palpable tension of the early 1950s amid Cold War anxieties. Reports of unidentified flying objects had been circulating since 1947, yet most were vague and easily disregardable. The incident in Locke was distinct. It constituted mass sightings over several nights, bolstered by credible scientific witnesses and photographs that stood up to meticulous analysis. For many, it appeared to affirm that something unexplainable, possibly even advanced technology, was traversing the skies of America. For the denizens of Locke, the events left an indelible mark. Parents recounted tales of children crying out in alarm as the light glided overhead. Neighbors shared stories of standing in mute astonishment, awed by the spectacle. The professors, despite their expertise and cautiousness, openly admitted they had witnessed something extraordinary, while Hart had fortuitously and quickly preserved the moment for posterity on film. As the years rolled by, the case retained its status as one of the most notable UFO enigmas. Skeptics continued to propose conventional explanations ranging from birds to atmospheric illusions, yet none fully accounted for all the details. Proponents of the phenomenon pointed to the unwavering consistency of the eyewitness accounts, the credibility of esteemed professors, and the lasting impact of the photographs as proof that the lights were more than mere ordinary occurrences. Even today, the photographs bear significant weight. They do not disclose any machinery or structural details, only luminous disks in a precise formation. Yet, it is precisely their simplicity that imbues them with power. They serve as undeniable evidence that something tangible was captured on film, defying explanation. The lights themselves never materialized again in that same manner. Locke returned to its ordinary cadence, filled with cotton harvests, college lectures, and tranquil evenings beneath the vast West Texas sky. However, those present in August 1951 would forever retain the memory of those nights. They recalled the brilliance of the lights, how silence enveloped entire streets as the formations glided past, and how their once familiar sky had suddenly seemed alien. Today, the Locke lights stand recognized as a pivotal chapter in the annals of UFO history. They remain unsolved, suspended in a realm between skepticism and belief. Were they aircraft of an unknown make, a natural phenomenon misinterpreted, or perhaps something entirely beyond our grasp? No conclusive answers have ever been presented. What persists is the certainty that for several nights in 1951, hundreds of witnesses observed something remarkable hovering over Texas, and a teenager fortuitously caught it on film. The nature of the lights may never be elucidated, but within their enigma lies a unique power. They remind us that even the most unremarkable locations, a backyard, a university town, a serene night sky, can suddenly unveil the extraordinary. For the residents of Locke, those evenings will always remain distinct, nights when the sky was adorned with bizarre formations, when silence and awe consumed a community, and when their reality felt briefly illuminated by the incomprehensible. In an equally intriguing episode in Great Falls, Montana, on the afternoon of August 15, 1950, the serene airfield was disrupted by the whir of a 16mm camera. Nicholas "Nick" Mariana, the general manager of the local professional baseball team, initially aimed his lens at the ballpark, capturing what he expected to be routine promotional footage. However, in a matter of moments, his camera tilted skyward, following the path of two bright silvery discs as they glided across the expansive Montana sky. The short film he produced would evolve into one of the most dissected, debated, and enduring pieces of UFO documentation in the history of America. Mariana later described how he was poised to capture promotional shots for the Great Falls Electrics when a flash of light diverted his attention. Upon looking up, he spotted two round metallic objects reflecting the sun's rays. They traversed the sky in formation, moving smoothly and silently from the northwest to the southeast. His secretary, Virginia, stood beside him as he hastily redirected the camera, witnessing the objects alongside him. He managed to film approximately 16 seconds of footage before the discs slipped beyond a grain elevator's shadow. Despite its brevity, the film was astonishing for its clarity. Frame by frame, two luminous circular objects can be seen gliding steadily across the sky. They bore no resemblance to aircraft, birds, or weather balloons. The sequence unfolded smoothly, exhibiting no signs of manipulation. For many, it marked the first genuinely convincing motion picture evidence of unidentified flying objects. Upon sharing the film, Mariana swiftly garnered attention. Local newspapers reported on the sighting, and within weeks, the United States Air Force had taken possession of the reel for examination under Project Grudge, the precursor to Project Blue Book. Mariana later asserted that upon its return, several frames were inexplicably missing, particularly the opening shots where the discs had appeared most clearly. This allegation only fueled suspicions that the Air Force had interfered with the evidence. The Air Force's official explanation claimed that the objects were reflections of F-94 jet fighters operating in the vicinity of Great Falls at that time. However, many experts vehemently disagreed. The movement exhibited by the objects appeared too fluid, their reflectivity too consistent, and their shapes too uniform. The jets in the area did not correspond with the trajectory or appearance of what Mariana had filmed. Civilian analysts, including individuals from the UFO research community, contended that the footage displayed solid disc-shaped crafts of unknowable origin. In the years that followed, the Great Falls film underwent countless re-evaluations. The Robertson Panel, established in 1953 by the CYA to analyze UFO evidence, scrutinized the footage, only to dismiss it as inconclusive. A decade later, the Condit Committee at the University of Colorado revisited the film, uncovering intriguing insights. Their photographic specialists determined that the aerial objects could not be identified as birds, balloons, or aircraft. Instead, they appeared genuinely anomalous. Still, the committee's concluding report chose to downplay the film's importance. For Mariana, the experience was a source of persistent frustration. He maintained until his passing that the film had undergone alterations and that the missing frames would have provided the clearest evidence of the disc shapes. His secretary, Renee, corroborated his testimony, expressing that neither had sought personal gain or publicity. To them, it was a remarkable encounter that they endeavored to document to the best of their abilities. The Great Falls film persists in holding a unique position in UFO history, standing out for being a motion picture captured in daylight with multiple witnesses and subject to extensive scrutiny over the decades. Unlike still photographs, which can often be dismissed as fabrications, the continuous motion displayed in the footage makes such explanations significantly more complex. Periodically, fresh inquiries into the film emerge as researchers slow the footage down, stabilize it using cutting-edge technology, and raise the same pivotal question. If these were indeed jets, why do they starkly differ from conventional aircraft? In Montana, the sighting has woven itself into the tapestry of local folklore. The residents of Great Falls take particular pride in their town being the birthplace of one of the earliest and clearest UFO films. The footage frequently finds its way into community gatherings, igniting discussions between skeptics and believers alike. For many locals, the memory of that fateful summer afternoon evolved into a significant element of their identity. Great Falls is recognized as the place where the flying saucers captured on film were first seen. What makes this case so remarkable is not solely the footage itself, but the ongoing debate surrounding it. Did the Air Force manipulate the film to obscure more definitive evidence? Were the objects genuinely advanced vehicles or merely reflections misinterpreted under unusual conditions? The absence of those initial frames, whether due to accidental loss or deliberate removal, guarantees that the dispute surrounding the film will remain unresolved. More than 70 years later, the Great Falls film continues to circulate, having been restored and digitized for contemporary audiences. It presents the same mysteries now as it did back in 1950. The discs traverse the frame with a steady movement, remaining unidentifiable while undeniably present. The film does not conclusively prove extraterrestrial visits to Montana, but it captures something real that is both unexplained and lasting. Ultimately, the Great Falls UFO film is less a repository of answers and more a testament to persistence. This real film, lasting only 16 seconds, has outlasted its creator, survived official dismissals, and transitioned seamlessly into the digital era as one of the most emblematic pieces of UFO evidence. Whether it depicts reflections, jets, or crafts beyond our comprehension, it resolutely refuses to fade into oblivion. Each time it is revisited, it confronts viewers with the same enigmatic question that first bewildered Nick Mariana on that August afternoon. What, in truth, traversed the skies of Montana? Thank you for being with us this evening on Night Archive. If these stories resonated with you, please remember to like, subscribe, and return tomorrow for more encounters with the unknown.